Hello, dreamers, and welcome to Haunted Sleep. This is the place where eerie tales and calming whispers meet, helping you drift into peaceful sleep with a touch of mystery. Before we begin tonight's story, I'd love to know, where in the world are you listening from? Leave a comment below and let me know. And if you're enjoying these nightly journeys, don't forget to like, subscribe, and tap the bell so you never miss a night of chilling calm. Now, close your eyes, get comfortable, and let's drift into the unknown together. I've had sleep problems most of my life. Doctors have called it different things: insomnia, delayed sleep phase, even a few rare names I can't remember now. Some of the pills they gave me did nothing. Some knocked me out so hard I slept 15 hours and woke up foggy for the next 12. One drug gave me night terrors so vivid I was scared to close my eyes. After a while I gave up on the prescriptions and started taking over-the-counter stuff. It isn't a smart plan, but it's what I do. I take 4 or 5 every night. It knocks me out, lets me get some rest, and I can still wake up for school or work. The price is the same every time. For about 7 or 8 hours, I cannot fully wake up. If my alarm goes off during that window, I'll smack it in my sleep and never know. If someone shakes me, I might open my eyes, even speak, and then drop straight back into the dark. My dreams learned that schedule before I did. They've changed to match it. This is one of those dreams. I'm standing in a room that doesn't care if I'm there. The air is still and stale, the light thin and yellow, coming from a small fixture that hums like an insect. There's a chair that looks like it was brought here for a person who never arrived, a couple of metal cabinets with dents in the doors, and a section of floor where the paint is scratched into a dull oval from years of feet turning the same way. I don't know how I got here. I only know I have to leave. I pull the handle and step into a hallway that stretches out both directions, the way hallways always stretch in dreams, like a level in an old video game. As soon as the door snicks shut behind me, my stomach tells me I made a mistake. There's nothing special about the hall. Flat gray walls, gray floor, gray ceiling with long, buzzing lights. But the wrong feeling slides over my shoulders like a cold coat. There are doors every 20 feet, each with a small square window of wired glass. The hallway reaches AT and splits left and right. I look both ways. They look the same. I pick right because it feels like a choice I've made before. The right hall bends and then forks, and then squeezes down to a blind little alcove with no door at the end. I turn around and walk back the other way, trying to memorize the path without thinking too hard about why I'm trying. Back at the first split, I go left. I make it 10 steps before the shape of the place finally clicks into something I can name. I'm in a maze. The moment I think that, the building tells me I'm not alone. A thin cry quivers through the air, high-pitched and sharp enough to make my teeth ache. It sounds like it's coming from far away and right next to my ear at the same time. Then I hear claws on metal, light at first, then clearer, click-clack, steady as a metronome. There is something else in here with me. It isn't a person. I walk faster, but I set my heels down soft, roll my weight across my feet so the soles don't slap. Every fork looks like the last fork. Every corner is another chance to pick wrong. I tell myself not to go straight when I can avoid it. I tell myself mazes are designed to trick you into thinking forward is progress. I keep left where I can, then right when I can't. The seams in the floor run in long strips that catch the light like water. They only show me how much I don't know. The next junction splits 3 ways. One narrow path goes straight. 2 broader paths go left and right. Straight feels like a trap. I go left. My breath starts to sound too loud. I swallow and try to calm it down. The clicking speeds up. Click-clack, click-clack, click-clack. It's trotting now, not walking, and the moves are light and quick and sure of themselves. Fear shifts from the back of my mind to the front, and with it an idea. It can probably smell me. I need to give it something wrong to smell. I peel off my jacket and drag it along my arm to pick up sweat, then jog to a dead end I passed 10 steps ago. I drop the jacket in the corner, rub it into the dust, and double back. It's not a great plan, but it's all I have. In dreams I always have these half-plans, the ones you come up with when you're not really you and your brain is trying to rewrite the rules on the fly. The claws pick up speed again. Click-clack, click-clack, click-clack. It's running now. It knows I'm here. Maybe it took the bait, maybe it didn't. I keep going. I hug corners with my shoulder, risk fast turns, throw glances over my shoulder without letting my feet slow down. A dead end. No door. No vent. No way to hide. I spin back the way I came and sprint, bare forearms prickling in the cold air, listening. The clicks grow louder, and then fade, and then grow again. In a maze that tells you nothing, sound can come from anywhere. I try a door for the first time. The knob refuses to turn. The lock hums the same light hum as the lights. I move to the next door, try it too. Locked. I look through the wired glass and see a shape. A person. A face I know. He turns at my motion and I realize he's a friend from school, the kind you talk to in the morning and ignore by lunch, safe and constant, the kind of person you expect to hold the door without thinking. I press my forehead to the wire and whisper, "Hey! Let me in!" I knock, soft at first, then harder. "It's me. Max. There's something out here." He looks me dead in the eyes, the way you look at someone across a cafeteria when you want them to know you see them. Then he turns his back and stares at the far wall. I rattle the knob until the tendons in my wrist hurt. "Please," I say. "Please." He stands there like I'm not real, and for a moment I wonder if he's the one in the dream and I'm the thing scratching at his door. The clicks stop. The silence is louder. I turn around and it's there. It's built like a dancer who decided fighting was a better way to make a living. The body is long and thin, balanced on two legs, a tail lifting and settling with each breath. Head to tail, 9 feet, maybe more. It stands as tall as a person, a little taller, shoulders narrow, chest narrow, lines smooth and built for speed. The arms hang low, the long fingers ending in claws that don't need help to finish what they start. The skin is not smooth. It's scaled and dry, a matte gray-green that absorbs the light. The mouth is the worst thing I've ever seen. A long jaw full of too many teeth like needles, not made to chew, just to catch and tear. It's the eyes, though, that pull the breath from my chest. 2 eyes on the front of the head, not the sides. Predators have eyes like that. The irises are thin and diamond-shaped, dark yellow glass with a slit cut into it. Both of them are locked on me. I run. The creature waits one thoughtful second and then screams, a thin, high sound that would hurt if I took the time to let it. It breaks into a sprint. I throw myself right and then left, trying to put as many turns as I can between us. For one breath I see it misjudge a corner and slide, claws scrabbling for grip, body smashing into a wall so hard it leaves a chalky white mark. It pushes off and runs again. I keep turning, keep running, keep hoping the physics of metal and feed can do me a favor. I swing around another corner, and hit something hard enough to put sparks behind my eyes. The floor slides under me. I wipe a long stripe of dust with my jacketless shoulder, and come to a stop on my back. I don't need to look to know what I ran into. It was rounding from the other side, taking a line I didn't expect. I caught it. It smacked the wall, and dropped to its hands and feet. For one strange heartbeat, our faces are inches apart, and we both look confused. It lunges. Instinct makes my hand shove down on the top of its head to push its jaws toward the floor. Its momentum helps me. Its teeth scrape the metal and spark. I grind my palm into rough scales and twist, jump to my feet, and run the way it didn't come from. I hear its breath behind me, the thin scream again, this time short and sharp like a laugh. My right forearm stings hot. I look down as I run and see 3 narrow red lines where a claw like the look of my skin. Blood beads fast, and then smears. My heartbeat leaves a dotted trail. It doesn't have to hurry now. It doesn't have to sniff at every corner. It can jog. It can jog and wait for me to make the only mistake I can make in a place like this, run myself into a box. I don't stop. The part of me that is still a kid believes there's an exit, that if I just follow the right pattern, There will be a door with a green bar and a sign that says push to open, and beyond it a parking lot and a night sky and a way home. Another dead end. The click of claws turns into a slow tap that comes closer and closer and then rounds my corner. It slows to a walk, and its mouth pulls back in a way that isn't a smile but is close enough to the idea to make bile burn the back of my throat. I throw my shoulder into it. I kick and push and try to grab for eyes. It is careful and cruel. The claws are fast. Joints open. The world narrows. There are sounds I don't want to describe. Even breathing out hurts. Somewhere inside the noise and bright pain a memory moves like a small fish. I have had this dream before. I have had it 100 times. I had it after I watched Jurassic Park for the first time as a kid and spent 3 weeks sleeping on the floor in my parents' room. I had it in middle school when the doctor switched my pills and I woke up crying without knowing why. I'm having it now. I am dreaming. Usually when you realize you're dreaming, you pop awake, sitting bolt upright like a bad actor in a cheap horror movie. Your brain hates contradictions and throws you out. That's what people say. That is not what happens to me. The moment I think, this is a dream, the maze blinks, and I'm back in the first room with the chair and the hum and the cabinet dents, and I know I am not waking up. I press against the place where my real body should be like I'm pushing my shoulder into a door. I look for the weight of the blanket at my feet, the drag of a sheet on my arm hair. I hunt for my eyelids, try to pry them open with muscles that are supposed to be mine. If I concentrate, I can feel the shape of my body in my bed like a shadow behind glass, but I can't get to it. It feels exactly like pushing on a brick wall. It feels like being buried and telling yourself to rise. The message doesn't get through. Fine, I tell myself. If I can't wake up, then I'll ride this out. People say if you know you're dreaming, you can control it. Make the nightmare into something good. Fly out a window, go somewhere warm, make something you shouldn't ask for in detail in the dark. I try. I close my eyes inside my own dream and imagine a door that opens to a beach, a car that starts, a bed in my own room. I imagine a light switch that works and my phone lighting up with a bright, normal time. The room stays the room. The hum stays the hum. The maze stays. Between 100 tries and 1,000, I have never once been able to snap my fingers inside a dream and change the set. My mind is stubborn. It insists on running this program until the timer runs out. I pace the small room until it feels like I've worn a path into the concrete. Time slides in a dream. A minute stretches. An hour folds up and disappears. I count to 100 and then again. The feeling of my real body in the real bed fades until it isn't a feeling anymore but a memory of a feeling. Sitting still doesn't help. I open the door and step back into the hall. This time I try to mark my path. I drag my fingernails along the gray paint at shoulder height and leave thin white scratches that look like chalk. I count steps between turns to keep the distances straight. Left, left, right, straight, right, left, straight, left. The labyrinth doesn't care about my plan. The clicks start again anyway, faint and patient. I try avoiding the sound. I try walking straight toward it, hoping for a fight I can win, as if bravery counts in a place where the floor itself lies. I try the doors again. Some have people in them. A woman with a red scarf sits on a chair and watches me through the glass, hands folded, eyes flat like a doll's. A man stands in the far corner of his room and faces the wall as if he's being punished. A little boy runs a toy car back and forth on the floor and doesn't look up. I knock. I plead. I pound until the heel of my hand throbs. No one opens. No one opens ever. Maybe they can't. Maybe that's their dream and I'm the thing on the wrong side of their door. I leave my shirt at one dead end. My shoes at another. The clicks veer off both times and then return. The third time I try to climb, I haul myself up into the ceiling tiles and find metal crossbeams and a duct I can't fit through. I pull until the cut on my arm opens again, and my hands get slippery with my own blood. I drop and land and feel the jolt in my knees and know none of this pain is real except the part that is. I laugh because it's too stupid not to. The sound is too loud. The clicks answer, and then the world turns into heat and sound and a blank white space where my thoughts should be. I respawn in the room like a character in a game. No blood now. No shirt. The jacket is gone because I left it where I left it. My hands look normal. I flex my fingers and feel the phantom sting where the claws went. I stare at the lights until they blur and turn into bright bars. I tell myself maybe if I'm not afraid, it won't hurt me. I open the door and walk. I don't run. I move slow and steady and force myself to breathe deep and even, like I'm about to take a test and don't want my mind to fog. The creature finds me anyway. It doesn't come from behind this time. It appears ahead, standing still in the middle of the hall like it knew where I'd turn. My skin goes cold at the sight of it. I try to stand there, still and calm. It tilts its head, a curious movement that looks wrong on a body like that. I take one step backward and the spell breaks. Then I run as fast as I can run. I do the maze 10 times, 20, 50. I stop counting because the number feels like a dare I don't want to take. Sometimes I make it far enough to think I've found the center. There will be a square room with 4 exits and a blank wall on the 5th side where my mind has started to cheat. Sometimes I make it back to the T where I started and think maybe I can leave the way I came. That door is always gone. Sometimes I get angry. I let the thing catch me on purpose, press my thumb into one of those yellow eyes and feel the soft pop and the hot wet rush over my hand. Once I blind it on the right side and it swings its head and roars and slams into a wall and I run left and right and left and slam into a dead end anyway, because hurt or not, it knows this place better than I do. I try to make maps on the floor with the stuff I have left. I tear my shirt into strips and knot them and lay a trail. It doesn't matter. The trail twists around and meets itself like a trick rope at a magic show. I scrape arrows into the paint with the corner of the metal cabinet door I finally rip open. The arrows point at themselves. Every clever thing I try turns into a loop. Every loop ends the same way. The alarm saves me. It's a cheap plastic clock with red numbers and a lazy speaker that turns every sound into a buzz. It doesn't matter. The wordless alarm slides into the dream, and for a second it hides under the scream the creature makes as it comes at me the last time. The sound grows. The maze light goes dim, and then lights up and then dims again like someone is flicking a switch in the ceiling. Everything in the dream peels back, and I'm in my bed, on my side, my arm numb under my own head. My heart is beating fast in my mouth, and my shirt is stuck to my back with sweat. I slap the clock off with a hand that feels like it belongs to someone else. I lie there and wait for the feeling to leave my body. It takes longer than it should. Sometimes it hangs around my ribs all morning like I swallowed ice. I tell myself it's Wednesday. I tell myself there's school. I tell myself I am fine. I pull on clean clothes, brush my teeth, rub the sleep out of my eyes, and try not to look too hard at my arm where the dream cut was. The skin is smooth. Of course it is. I tell myself to stop checking, and then I check again. I drive the old car to school and sing along to the same songs I always sing along to because I found my Best of Aerosmith CD under the seat yesterday, and it still plays even with the crack through. Dream on. I stop at Burger King and get a breakfast sandwich and a coffee and burn my tongue on the first sip and leave the little cardboard thing on the dashboard because the cup leaks. I park in the far corner of the lot because I'm late and the close spots are taken, and I walk past 4 rows of cars and 3 friends I always talk to in the morning. We lean against a brick wall and complain about tests and tell the same dumb jokes. I'm late to first period and my government teacher gives me a look and asks for my homework, and I shrug and grumble and sit down. She starts in on the judiciary. I pretend to take notes. The rhythm of it is a song I know by heart. Something is wrong. The feeling starts small, like when you hear a word pronounced in a way you've never heard and you're not sure if it's the other person's mistake or yours. I look at the clock on the back wall, and it says 4:30. I decide it's fast, or the battery is dying. I open my book, and the page is blank. I flip to the next. Blank. The whole book is a stack of white. There is a moment of stillness that feels like a held breath. I look at my hands. They look the way they always look. I look down at my desk. Someone carved initials into the wood before I ever sat here. I run my finger over them. It catches on the grooves. For a moment I'm convinced I've imagined the blank pages. I pick up my pen and write my name on the corner of the desk, and the ink soaks into the wood like a wet road. The wrongness doesn't stop. It grows roots and crawls up my skin. I close the book and stare at the cover. This isn't my copy. Mine has a rounded corner. This one is sharp. I reach back to the last day I should have held this book, the last time I sat in this chair, and it isn't yesterday or today. It's years ago. I graduated. I stood in a gown and threw a cap, and the tassel hit my cheek, and I cried in a way I would never admit. The car I drove in this morning? I sold it last year to pay rent. That CD? I lost it when I moved. The friends by the wall? I haven't seen 2 of them in 3 years, and the third is dead. The taste in my mouth turns to metal. I squeeze the edge of the desk hard enough to make my knuckles ache. I think the words carefully so they land in my head right instead of sliding through. I am still asleep. I never woke up. The alarm in the maze was a dream. The clock on my table is still counting down the hours when the pills make me useless. I am stuck here until it decides to bring me back. I do all the things they tell you to do when you get lucid. I count my fingers. I have 5 on each hand. I look at the door, and then away, and then back to see if it changes. It does, a little. The handle is on the wrong side for half a second, then right again. I try to make the teacher say my name. She moves her mouth, and sound comes out, and none of it touches me. I pull my phone out of my pocket. The screen lights up. The numbers on the lock screen bleed into each other as I look at them. I try to call my dad. The phone vibrates in my hand. A faint ring comes from my other pocket, and I want to throw up. I send a text to myself as a joke. The letters crawl away from each other like ants and fall off the screen. I stand up and walk out of the room. No one stops me. The hallway is too long. It doesn't end where it should. The trophy case is filled with trophies for sports our school never played. The posters on the wall tell me the same meeting is happening on the same date in a month that doesn't exist. The intercom pops and says words I can't remember even as I'm hearing them. I push on the front door, and my hand goes through it like it's heavy smoke. The cold air in the gap feels like real cold, and I can't step through. The door lets me go when it wants. Not before. The whole school breathes. It inhales when I do, exhales when I don't. The floor under my shoes feels too soft, then too hard, then perfectly normal. I walk to the cafeteria, and the smell of grease and ketchup and dishwater hits me and makes my throat tighten with a quick, stupid burst of hunger. And then the trays are empty and the people are gone and the clock in there says 4:32. I look at my phone and think about setting a timer, but I don't know what time it is where my real body is, and the thought of watching numbers shift and not meaning anything burns a hole in my chest. I tried to wake up again anyway, because that's all there is left to try. I stand still and find the shape of my real arm in the shape of my dream arm. I push my shoulder against my own skin from the inside and tell my eyes to open. Open, open, open. The wall pushes back. Time goes soft around me. The edges of things blur and then sharpen. I close my eyes and open them, and I'm still here. I close them again and open them and have no idea how long I stood there trying. The worst part isn't the maze or the thing in it or the way the school stretches like gum. The worst part is the knowing. It sits heavy and certain. Nothing I do matters until an alarm I cannot control decides I get to come back. There is no switch. There is no trick. There is just waiting. I can walk. I can talk. I can pretend the day is a day. I can pick up a book with no words and turn pages that don't exist. I can watch my hand write my name on a desk that belongs to a kid I don't know anymore. I can think of a friend whose funeral made more sense than any of this. I can tell myself that when the sound comes, I'll wake up for real. I can tell myself I set the alarm and it will ring and I won't sleep through it. I can tell myself 100 times. I whisper things just to hear a voice in the air. I tell a joke out loud. I apologize to the empty hall for running. I say my own name to keep the shape of it where I can find it. I think about the way that dinosaur looked at me with both eyes, and I think about the way my friend looked straight at me through glass and turned away. I wonder which one is worse. I wonder which one is real. And then, later, whether it's minutes or hours or the kind of time that doesn't fit in a calendar, the sound comes. It doesn't always sound like an alarm. Sometimes it sounds like a truck downshifting outside my window. Sometimes it sounds like my dad dropping a spoon in a sink. Sometimes it's a sudden quiet that announces itself the way thunder announces itself, in reverse. Whatever shape it takes, it slices through the dream and the dream tries to hold, and then I am in the bed again with my heart kicking a fast drum and my face wet and my arm numb and my mouth open. The clock is where I left it. The red numbers are whatever they are. I get up and move on because I have to. That's the whole trick. You move. You wait. You move again. Sorry to interrupt. If you're enjoying the story, let me know in the comments and tell me where you're watching from. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more. I picked up a bad habit in college, and it wasn't the kind that makes for wild stories. No shouts lined up on sticky bar tops, no smoke curling from the lips of strangers in cramped apartments. Mine was smaller and, in its own way, a little sadder. I kept falling asleep in class. It wasn't on purpose. My schedule and my stomach formed a weird partnership against me. Breakfast, then computer science. Lunch, then general biology. Dinner, then statistics. Every time I sat down, warm and fed, the fluorescent lights and the steady voice at the front of the room turned into a soft blanket I didn't ask for. My eyelids would get heavy. My pen would slide down the page and leave a crooked line through my notes. I'd fight it some days and win, and other days I'd lose without even knowing I was in a fight. Most of our big classes met in the science center. From the outside it could have been a parking garage. Big blocks of poured concrete, narrow slits for windows, and stairwells that looked like ramps someone forgot to finish. It had no business being ugly on a campus with brick paths and old trees, but there it sat, square and stubborn, like it had decided being pretty wasn't part of its job. Inside wasn't better. The same gray surfaces, the same humming lights that made everyone's skin the same pale color. The floors were clean because there was nothing to dirty them. The air smelled faintly like dust and copier toner. You could get lost in it without ever turning a corner, just because every corner looked the same. The only splash of color lived on the third floor where the faculty offices were, and even there the bulletin boards were tired. Posters about research groups nobody outside the labs understood. Flyers for guest lectures in fonts that tried too hard to sound exciting. A fake ficus in a ceramic pot that someone watered once a month out of habit. You could walk that hallway and feel like time had stopped and never told anyone. The statistics lecture met in one of the lower auditoriums, a long room that stepped down toward a whiteboard and a screen that never rolled up all the way. Rows of attached chairs and long desks formed terraces, and if you sat in the back row you could see the whole class in front of you like a map. I liked it back there. It felt safe. I could spread out my notebook, prop my feet on the metal bar, and pretend I was invisible. On good days I copied formulas that made sense in the moment, and turned to fog the second I left the building. On bad days I listened to my stomach process dinner, while the professor's voice became a metronome, tick tick tick, and the numbers on the slides blurred together. That habit broke in one night. It was after dinner, a heavy one from the student union because I was trying to spend fewer nights eating cereal in my room. I took my seat in the back and set out my stuff like I always did, pen on the right, notebook open to a clean page, calculator I never used within reach just in case I suddenly became the kind of person who touched buttons with confidence. The professor started talking in the same calm way he always did. He had a voice built for putting people at ease, which is great for a dentist and rough on a teacher who has to keep 100 tired students focused after 7 p.m. He talked about distributions and sample sizes, about error bars and the comfort of large numbers, and I tucked my chin into the heel of my hand and told myself I was just resting my eyes. You never really notice yourself falling asleep unless you fight it. I wasn't fighting. My pen loosened in my fingers. My notes sloped into nonsense. The room softened at the edges and then slipped away. When I heard my name, I sat up straight so fast my neck twinged. Yes? It came out automatic, the way it always does when a teacher snaps you out of a nap and you try to pretend you weren't sleeping by answering like you're on top of things. My face went hot. I braced for the giggles, the snorts, the whisper from the row in front of me, "Dude." But nobody laughed. Because nobody was there. The room was dark. Not pitch black. The exit sign over the side door ran a stripe of weak yellow across the steps, enough to turn the nearest desks into low gray shapes, but dark enough that the air felt thicker. The projector was off. The whiteboard was blank. My watch told me I'd missed not just the lecture but whatever came after it. Past 9. I'd slept long enough to be a problem and, for the first time, nobody had nudged me on their way out. No. "Hey man, class is over." No backpack bump. I pictured everyone filing past me, whispering, or maybe stepping quietly because waking me felt rude, and a small embarrassed part of me hurt more than it should have. I told myself the voice that said my name had been part of a dream. Sometimes your own thoughts ride the line between sleep and awake, and then spill into the room when the line vanishes. That had to be it. The moment I decided that, the voice came again. It wasn't my head. It was low and hollow, the kind of sound that doesn't have a throat behind it. It wasn't angry or friendly. It said my name the way a recorder repeats a sound after you push play, flat and exact, like it was more interested in getting the syllables right than in reaching me. It echoed off the walls and died near the ceiling. I swallowed. "Hello?" My voice sounded wrong to my own ears, too loud and too thin at the same time. It fell into the dark and didn't bounce back. Something moved down the road below me. Not walking. Not the steady heel-to-toe of shoes on carpet. A shuffle, soft and quick, like fabric sliding over plastic or skin brushing against the underside of desks. It was several steps down and to my left. A phrase my brain picked up and set on a shelf because it sounded like a police report. I couldn't see it, not yet, but the sound brought a shape with it, and that shape was heading for me. My heart flipped into fast. I stood too quickly and my knee hit the underside of the desk. My book slid. My pen rolled to the edge and tipped off, the small sound it made when it hit the next step below me louder than it had any right to be. For a stupid second I thought about climbing down to get it because that's what you do when something falls in class. You reach, you retrieve, you resume. Then the shuffling stopped, and the room smoothed out into a silence so deep I could hear my watch tick. I held my breath. I didn't tell it to stop, it just did, the way you freeze when a deer lifts its head in a field. The want to move was a pressure inside my ribs. I could have gone. I should have gone. All I had to do was walk the road to the right, climb the steps to the door, and step into the empty hallway. But a thin piece of me, the piece that watches scary movies with the sound low, wanted proof that I wasn't just scaring myself. I wanted to hear it again. I wanted to know if the voice would sound the same now that I was awake. It said my name like a parrot would, exact, emotionless, then nothing. The shuffle returned. It was different now, faster and closer, a brushing scrape that rose into a frantic rush. The sound jumped from row to aisle, then up the steps, climbing fast in short bursts like a person on all fours. It called my name again and added a breathy noise to it, like a kid trying out a word for the first time and getting excited that it came out right. That broke whatever spell had held me still. I clutched my notebook and the textbook I never opened and ran for the opposite end of the row, stumbling over the bolt that held the desk leg to the floor, trying to keep the pages from sliding. The aisle to the right was 10 seats away, and it felt like 100. I glanced back because the worst thing about running from nothing is not knowing how big it is. The light from the exit painted the edges of the desks nearest me and left everything else in layered dark. In that thin glow I made out a shape that could have been a person if a person moved wrong. It came around the end of a row and into the aisle below mine on both hands and both feet, knees and elbows bent, back curved up into a painful arch. Its head bobbed with each quick step like it wasn't attached quite right. On flat ground it might have looked like someone doing a crab walk in a gym class, but the steps broke that image into something else, something that didn't belong in a room built for taking notes and counting points on exams. When it felt me see it, it sped up. It stopped using the aisles and climbed onto the desks, cutting straight across the row instead of following the path people use. The plastic seats rocked and thumped under its weight. It made a sound while it moved, a wet clicking run together into a gurgle, like water trying to speak, gluck glug 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 gluck, pure nonsense full of meaning only to the thing making it. There was joy in it, or maybe not joy but an eagerness with teeth. I hit the end of my row shoulder first. The wall did not get out of my way. Pain shot down my arm and I lost my grip on the notebook. I tripped down the steps and saved myself by momentum alone, my feet slapping and sliding, hands grazing the edges of desks to steer. The front of the auditorium rose up like a low wall, then the side door, half lit, wide open. I didn't look back again. Whatever was behind me knew I was running. Whatever it was, it sounded like it like that. I tore into the hallway and found nothing there but quiet. The hall lights were on a motion sensor that didn't care about me yet, so they only glowed in dim strips and then brightened as I ran under them. The science center at night is always empty. People do their labs in the afternoon or in rooms with windows and then move their study groups to the library. The offices on the third floor might have light behind their doors, but you never saw the people who sat in there. This part of the building, the lower level near the auditoriums, slept early. Today it felt like it wasn't sleeping, it was holding its breath. I sprinted past the framed evacuation map, past the vending machine that was always out of the one thing anyone wanted, past the water fountain with a sign taped over it, "Do not use," like water itself had given up on this place. The main exit was ahead, glass doors with metal bars and a big, black rectangle of night beyond them. I pushed through and the cold reached up from the concrete and grabbed my lungs. Outside, a handful of students crossed the plaza on their way to the library or to a late meal, faces down, hands in pockets. I must have made a sound because they all looked up at once. I didn't stop. I ran until the science center was behind me, until the lights from other buildings felt like real lights and not reflections in a dull eye. In my dorm I locked the door and pulled the blinds and turned on every lamp I had, small and cheap and yellow. I sat on my bed with my back to the wall and waited for the thud of feet in the hall, for my roommate to shake the handle and swear because I never locked it. Man, what the hell. When he finally came back, I lied without planning to. "Fell asleep in stat," I said, trying to make it a joke. "Missed the whole thing." I knew my face had that stretched look it gets when you've scared yourself quiet. He didn't ask. He dug in his backpack for headphones and left me to the hum of the lamps and the sound of my own breath. What was it? I didn't know. I still don't. The building didn't feel haunted in any fun way. No candles, no whispers that meant anything, no cold spots you could mark on a map and come back to later with friends for a test of courage. It was just there, and then it wasn't, the way some things are. My best guess came a week later when I told the story in low slices to a grad student who'd been around long enough to know the corners under the corners. We were in the student union coffee line, and she had that look grad students get when they're not sure if they should be amused or concerned, the look that says, "I live in a different part of this world than you." She said, without smiling, that when they were building the science center a guy had fallen through a skylight. She said he had been up on the roof with a bucket of tar and a crew of other guys and stepped onto a sheet of glass over a stairwell because he wasn't watching his feet. She said he dropped 3 stories and broke his neck on the railings on the way down. She said it was instant, like that word ever helps. She'd been at the school a long time, long enough to know stories you don't find on tours. I asked her if she knew his name, if there was a plaque, if anyone talked about it officially. She shrugged. She wasn't sure. She'd heard it from someone else who had heard it from someone who used to work maintenance. I tried to look it up later and found nothing. No archive mention, no old newspaper clipping online, no little memorial in a corner with a date. Maybe the story had been sanded smooth by a decade of retelling. Maybe it wasn't true. Maybe I wanted it to be true because then the thing in the lecture hall had a shape that made sense. I can tell you what I changed after that, and it's small and it stayed. I didn't go to the science center after dark anymore. A lot of people didn't for their own reasons. No printers there, the library was nicer, there was a pizza place closer to the dorms, and mine fit neatly among theirs. And I stopped falling asleep in class. It turns out fear isn't a great study method, but it's effective in the short term. In statistics I sat 2 rows closer to the front, and took notes, like my grade depended on the angle of my pen. If my eyelids drooped I'd sit up and shift in my seat and press the tip of the pen into the paper so hard it left a groove. If dinner sat heavy in my stomach, I ate less. I chewed gum. I brought a water bottle and took sips I didn't need just to have something to do that wasn't closing my eyes. All those tricks people tell you, the ones I laughed at, I used them. They worked enough. I didn't drift anymore. I didn't dream with my head on my hand in that room again. When I think about what it was, my mind runs through a list like I'm checking boxes. A prank? The science center didn't breed pranksters. Even if it had, no human being moves the way that thing moved, hands and feet, knees and elbows, back up like a bow ready to snap, head bobbing as if the neck was a hinge. An animal? In an auditorium? In the third step from the back? No. A dream? A dream that followed me out of the room and into the hall and into the air outside until it let me go on the plaza under the cold? I know the feeling of waking and being wrong, the moment when the world still wears the colors from your bed. This wasn't that. I woke when I heard my name and found the room empty and dark and not mine. The voice came again with no mouth behind it. The shape came with its noise, gibberish strung together like a laugh. And I did what any animal does when it meets a shape with a mouth full of small knives. I ran. Sometimes I remember small pieces I didn't notice while it was happening and they bother me in new ways. The way the voice said my name, exactly right. Not stretched, not mispronounced, not curious or kind. A recording. Who would it have recorded? Me, sleeping in the back row week after week, mouth open, pen falling? The way the head moved. As if it had weight and the body underneath it wasn't built to carry it upright for long, so it let gravity do most of the work. The way it shifted from the aisle to the desktops like it realized the paths we made weren't the shortest way to get where it wanted. The way it started sounding pleased once I ran. There's a part of me that insists even now that it sounded pleased, like it had been waiting all along for me to stop sitting still. You'd think I would have told everyone. That I'd turn the story into a warning or a joke, or something I could trade for free pizza and a circle of faces around a table. I didn't. I told the grad student and my roommate, and then I shut it up in the same place I now kept the habit of sleeping with my chin in my hand. Every once in a while someone would mention falling asleep in class and I'd feel the old heat in my face and say, I used to do that. And leave it there. That felt like the right size for it. Time makes everything smaller. The science center didn't change its shape, but my schedule moved on and my classes met somewhere else. The people I sat behind got older and moved away. The professor in statistics kept talking about distributions to new faces and never knew he'd missed the last 10 minutes of my attention at night to something that had nothing to do with numbers. I graduated and sold the textbook for cash I spent on food I don't remember. I never walked past that auditorium alone after sunset again, but that was easy. There were always better places to be. On some nights when sleep sits far away and refuses to come closer, I think about the lecture hall and the thin, yellow strip of light and the sound of something that did not belong on a desktop pushing itself forward with both hands and both feet, head loose, back bent, eager. I think about how my name sounded when it hit the empty room. Not pleading. Not angry. Just exact. As if knowing how to say me was the first and only step it needed to take to find me. That's how you break a bad habit, I guess. You give it a reason not to be a habit anymore. Mine showed its face, or whatever it used for one, and it worked. I never drifted off in a classroom again. I learned to chew gum and drink water and sit up straight and listen, because the alternative was closing my eyes to the hum of the lights and letting something in the quiet learn my name well enough to say it back to me. I found the listing by accident, scrolling through pages of used cars with dented doors and mystery lights on their dashboards. The photos were a little dark, but even on a phone screen I could tell something was different. The ad said the car had been converted so the gas and brake could be worked by hand. The seller mentioned the brand and the mileage and a few simple lines about it running well. Then he put the price, like it was nothing. I felt my stomach jump the way it does when a bus takes a corner too fast. It wasn't just a good deal, it was the kind of number that makes you check if you're reading it right. I read it again and again anyway. Reliable model. Clean title. No accidents on record. Hand controls installed. $1,000. I had learned to drive in a car like that, where you turn and push a handle to speed up or slow down, and your feet can stay out of the picture. Mine were gone long before I was old enough to take a test. A childhood illness took them and left me with a lot of practice at figuring things out. Someone taught me the hand control system when I was 16, and the first time I merged onto the highway and felt the road slide under me and the lane lines stream by, I cried behind my sunglasses where no one could see. I kept that first car for 10 years. I kept it clean. I knew every sound it made and how to coax it into starting on January mornings. Someone stole it from outside my place late one night, and when the tow yard told me it had been stripped for parts, one had to sit down on the curb and pretend I was just tired. Cars like that aren't common, and when you find one they're priced as if you've done something wrong and now you have to pay for it. The good ones, the ones where the controls feel like they were meant to be there, not bolted on as an afterthought, are more than I make in a year. I saved what I could and told myself to be patient, and still there were days when I sat on the bus with my hands in my pockets and watched the city pass and thought about the feeling of a wheel under my palms. That night, looking at the listing, I thought about it again and hit call before I could talk myself out of it. A man answered on the third ring. He spoke in the cautious way people do when they've had a dozen bad calls in a row and don't want to get their hopes up. When I told him I was serious, he softened. He said he'd had the car altered for his daughter after an accident. He said she didn't drive anymore, and seeing the car out front broke her down. He wanted it gone for her sake. We set a time. 2 o'clock. He gave me the address and thanked me like I was doing him a favor. I took my time getting ready. I pulled my favorite pair of prosthetics from the closet and set them upright against the bed so the painted koi fish on the shins faced me, orange and white with black speckles, tails curved like they were about to glide around the back. Dana had painted them for me when they were still new and I was still getting used to the weight of them. She spread newspapers on her kitchen floor and told me to sit in the chair and trust her. She took her time with the brush, and when she finished and the paint was dry, she made me walk down the hall and back so she could see the fish move. Every time I wore them out after that, a stranger smiled. It made me smile back. By the time I locked my door, I was excited in a way that felt dangerous. I kept telling myself to slow down, to be careful, to not get ahead of things. I took the bus across town anyway, tapping my card and taking a seat by the window. A kid stared at my legs and then at the fish and then at me. I smiled and he smiled back, the way kids do when they like something but don't have the right word for it yet. I got off a stop early because waiting one more block felt like too much. The street was quiet and clean, with trees planted in straight lines and small flags snapping on front porches. I didn't need to check the house number. The car sat in the driveway and the sun hit it in a way that made the paint look deep and even. It was the right model. It was the right year. The body looked smooth, no rust, no mismatched panels. From where I stood on the sidewalk I could already picture the steering wheel and the hand control, the little gleam of the metal bar where your fingers rest. I walked toward it and nearly missed the woman on the picnic table by the side of the yard. She wore a heavy black coat even though the day was mild, and her hair was the kind of white that comes early and doesn't ask permission. Her hands were in her lap and her eyes were on the back seat door. "Hey," I said, lifting a hand. "I'm Finn. I'm here about the car." She didn't smile. Her gaze slid from the rear door to my face, and for a second I felt as if someone had tipped a bucket of cold water down my back. She looked scared. Not nervous. Scared. "There is something living in the back seat," she said. Her voice was soft, like she had said the words too many times and now they could only come out as a breath. I paused because I didn't know what else to do. "Sorry, what?" "There is something alive in the back seat." She opened her mouth like she was going to say more, closed it again, and turned back to the car. The coat shifted on her shoulders. The sun went behind a cloud. The front door opened hard enough to bump the wall, and a man hurried out. He was in his 50s maybe, with the kind of posture that goes with being tired and trying not to show it. He smiled at me like we had already met. "You must be Finn." "Sorry, I didn't hear you walk up." "It's fine," I said, and then, because the moment had stretched into a shape I didn't understand, I added, "She said there's something living in the back seat. Do you have, like, a pest issue? Squirrels? Mice?" He turned and saw the woman. His face fell. "Jane," he said, more to himself than to her. Then to me. "I'm sorry. She's not herself these days." He went to her and put a hand under her elbow like he meant to help her up. "I told you to stay inside. He deserves to know what's living back there," she said louder, eyes still on the car. Her voice cut in a way that made the small hairs on my arms stand up. He lifted her carefully and turned toward the house. Over his shoulder he called, "I'll be right back," and then lower to me, "She's exhausted." As he crossed the threshold with her in his arms, she lifted her head and looked straight at me. "Beware," she said. "It took my legs, but it wants a life." The door clicked shut behind them. For a second the only sound on the street was a flag snapping and the distant hiss of a sprinkler. I stood there with my hands in my jacket pockets and thought about leaving. It wouldn't be graceful. I didn't have my running legs on, and my balance is never better when my mind is spinning. But I could do it. I could turn without looking back and let the bus carry me to a different part of the day. Then I looked at the car again. I looked at the clean line of the fender and the shine on the hood. I thought about handing over $1,000 and driving to Dana's place and honking once to make her look out her window. I thought about the DMV, about plates that were mine, about waking up in the morning and not checking the bus schedule before anything else. The man came back out, wiping his forehead with the flat of his hand. He tried to smile. "Sorry about that. I thought she was lying down. Jane is, well, she's been through a lot. Is she okay?" I asked, even as my brain told me it was the wrong question and the obvious one at the same time. "The accident was bad," he said. He looked past me, toward nothing. "Even though it's been a year, she can't let it go. Some days are okay. Some aren't." He cleared his throat. "You heard what she said. She's made up this idea." He let the sentence trail off, then picked a different one. "She says something sits in the back and that's why she crashed. Not the drinking. She was drinking." "I'm sorry," I said, because there isn't a right thing to say and that's the closest anyone can get. He lifted one hand as if to wave off the whole subject. "Let me show you the setup." He walked me around the car with a practiced calm, opening doors and pointing out details. The hand control was mounted solidly, no wobble in the joints. The seats were clean, no tears. The floor mats were new. Under the hood, the belts looked fresh and the hoses were firm. The smell inside was that neutral scent old cars sometimes have when their owners never smoked and kept the windows up. On the test drive, the engine sounded right. The wheel didn't pull. The control took a minute to settle into my hands, the way it always does after a break, and then it felt natural, like the movements had been waiting under my skin for me to call them back. We did the papers in his kitchen. He set them side by side and made sure the names were where they should be. He signed with a steady hand and looked relieved every time the pen left the page. When I counted out the money from an envelope, his eyes flashed wet and he looked away until it passed. "You won't regret it," he said, seeing me to the door. "I promise." I drove straight to the DMV because I couldn't stand the idea of the car sitting there with no proof it was mine. The line was long, and the air indoors was stale and a little warm, but I didn't care. I held the number and stared at the screen. When they called me up and took my form and my fee, I felt like somebody had just slid a clear pane of glass between me and a lot of old trouble. When the plates came out from under the counter with the little clatter they always make, I wanted to laugh. I screwed them on in the parking lot, crooked at first, then straight. I stood back and looked at the car. It looked back like it had always been mine. I called Dana on my way out and told her to listen, then tapped the horn lightly and told her to come outside. She laughed the way she laughs when she's happy and surprised at the same time, and told me to get over to her place. I could hear her smile through the phone. Driving over felt like being let back into a room I loved and had been locked out of. I set the radio low because I wanted the sound of the engine in my ears. The hand control moved smooth and easy under my fingers. The sun slid toward the roofs and the light on the street got warmer and longer, and the whole city looked like it had been washed. I thought about work. A car would mean more choices. I could take interviews I couldn't take before because bus connections made them impossible. I could pick up extra hours if I needed to. I could stop thinking about how long groceries weighed on my arms on the walk home. I could buy a ring without worrying it would take me 5 transfers to get to the store. Those thoughts crowded up until there wasn't much room for anything else. That's probably why I didn't notice the sound right away. It started as a mild, low rumble, the kind you shrug at because old cars talk sometimes. It came and went over the cracks in the road. I turned the radio down to nothing and listened. When I put my hand on the shifter, the sound seemed to answer me, like a voice talking behind a closed door, too low for words. I told myself it was a loose panel, a heat shield, an exhaust clamp. I told myself I'd take it to a shop in the morning and let someone with a light and a lift find it while I waited with a coffee. When I reached Dana's, I let the engine tick itself quiet and decided not to bother her with it. I wanted to hold on to the simple part of the day for one more hour. She was waiting at the window and she ran down the steps barefoot, her hair up in a knot, her face bright. She walked around the car once with a half-mocking, half-serious air, like a coach checking out a player before deciding whether to put them in. When she opened my door, she leaned in and kissed me quick. "You did it," she said. "You really did it." We ate pasta and sat on her couch and made plans the way people do when something lifts off their shoulders. She fit under my arm like she always did, warm and steady. She said things like, "Now you can pick me up from the late shift," and "We can go visit your sister without borrowing anyone's car," and "We should go to the coast and sit in the fog and drink too much coffee." I said yes to everything because I could picture all of it. I said yes because I meant it. In the morning, the apartment was quiet except for the small sounds buildings make when they settle. Dana slept curled toward my side, one hand tucked under her cheek. I watched her breathe for a minute because I always liked watching the calm on her face before the day took its piece. I kissed her forehead, and she made a small sound without waking up. I dressed without turning on the light, rolled my ankle to seat the prosthetic, clicked the locks, and slipped out with my keys. The sky was a flat pale gray that promised another plain day. I buckled in and started the car. The engine pulled like it had the night before. I turned out of her lot and headed for the mechanics. Halfway there, the rumble returned. It grew faster over the bumps, then stretched into something thinner, a whisper that seemed to come from under my ear instead of under the floor. I told myself to stop it. "You're setting yourself up," I thought. "You heard what Jane said and now you hear things you want to hear." Except I hadn't wanted to hear any of it. I turned the radio back on, then off. The whisper stayed. Every time the car moved, it moved, like breath on the back of my neck. At a red light, I glanced at the mirror to break the feeling. The back seat was in its place, empty and clean, a seatbelt twisted twice the way all seatbelts end up twisting. As I shifted my eyes back to the road, something red slid up into the corner of the mirror. It was only there for the blink between glances, like a smear left by a hand on glass, and then it was gone. I told myself I was looking for it, and that's why I saw it. I told myself to keep my eyes on the lane. The light turned green and I went. At the shop, 2 mechanics took their time with the car. They lifted it and banged on the exhaust. They tightened joints and checked the bolts that held the shield over the muffler. They opened doors and felt under seats and pulled up floor mats. While I waited, I paced the small square of the waiting area and read the same 3 lines from the same tape sign about timing belts until I could recite them. When the older mechanic came out with a clean rag in his back pocket and a careful face, I braced for bad news. "Nothing," he said. "You got lucky. Whoever owned it took care of it. I tightened a few things just to be sure, but there's nothing there to make the noise you described. Could something be living in the car?" It came out before I could stop it. It sounded ridiculous in the shop air. "Like a squirrel or something." He smiled with his mouth more than with his eyes. "We'd see signs. Droppings, nests, chewed wire. There's nothing like that in there. Unless it's invisible, you're clean." He shrugged. "Take it home. If it does it again, come back and we'll take another look." On the drive back, the rumble waited a few blocks before it started up, polite like a guest at a dinner table. I felt my shoulders climb up toward my ears. I made myself breathe slow. I reached back and pressed my fingers into the seam where the back cushion met the seat like muscle memory from childhood, when something in the dark scared you and you touched it to prove it wasn't there. It pulled my hair. It wasn't hard. It was the light tug that a cat gives you when it bats at your head from the back of a couch. I snapped my head to the side and smacked my own shoulder with the back of my hand as if I could grab a wrist that wasn't there. The car behind me honked. I looked up at the light. Green. I eased forward. A minute later, something thin and sharp skimmed the skin at the base of my neck and left 4 pink lines that stung under my collar. I didn't turn around that time. I knew what would happen if I did. I kept my eyes forward and my hands steady and told myself to drive. The whisper came again. I couldn't make out words. It sounded like breath squeezing through teeth. Then, clear and close, the word out, like a match snapped to life and gone again. Out. Then again. Out, out, out. I looked at the mirror even though I had promised myself not to. The red smear wasn't a smear now. It was the edge of a shape peeking out from behind my seat, the color of meat that's been washed too long, slick and raw. An arm, I thought, because that's what it looked like for the second it showed itself before it slid out of sight. An arm thin and too long with something at the end that could have been a hand or not. I think my mouth said no. The rest of me didn't. I pressed the brake too late. The airbag took the rest of the decision out of my hands. It hit me so fast my head snapped sideways and my chest yelled all at once. The car shuddered hard and then went very still. Sound came back in pieces. Someone's voice on a phone. My own breath loud and wrong inside the cabin. A car door slamming. I realized I'd hit the car in front of me. The back window of their sedan was intact, but the trunk was folded like paper and the bumper hung at an angle like a smile that had lost its nerve. I tasted airbag powder in my mouth and wiped it off my lips with the back of my hand. The bag slumped down. The car smelled sweet and burned. The seatbelt cut a tight line across my chest. I undid it with fingers that didn't want to listen to me and checked my neck for blood. There was none, only 4 red marks that would probably disappear by afternoon. A police car slid up with its lights turning slow without the sound. An officer got out, young and careful. He asked if I was okay in a voice built for people who are not. I stepped out and apologized until the words felt slippery. The driver of the other car was shaking and angry and unhurt. I told the truth that mattered, that I wasn't paying attention, because the truth that sat in my mouth like a secret would have opened a door I didn't know how to close. Someone handed me a clipboard. Someone else told me about a tow. When they asked for my insurance, my stomach sank. I had planned to make that call after the DMV. Now my face grew hot while I explained and nodded through the lecture I deserved. When it was over and the street yawned wide again, the car still sat square on its tires with the hood down and the bumper straight. No scratches. No dents. It looked like it was waiting for me to get back in and finish my errand. I pressed my hand to the hood. It was warm. I took my keys out and hesitated because what else could I do? Dana answered the phone on the first ring. I told her about the crash in the plainest way I could and left out the parts that would make her pull away for a second to look at me. She told me to come over. Her voice was steel wrapped in cotton. She said she would be outside waiting. She said we would figure it out. I said okay. I put the car in gear and pulled away like the road might break under me if I moved too fast. I drove like a person in a parade. People slid around me and honked, and I didn't care. My hands shook on the control until I made them stop. Every sound in the car sounded like a voice. Every small motion in the mirror looked like a color it shouldn't be. The urge to pull over and walk the rest of the way rose up, and I pushed it down because there are parts of this city where walking with your knees aching and your mind scattered is a different kind of danger. I breathed in for 4 and out for 6 like someone once taught me and counted corners. When I turned onto Dana's street, something let go inside me. I saw her on the sidewalk, arms folded, jaw set. She was barefoot again, and the fold of her t-shirt at her shoulder made a small shadow. I parked at the curb and killed the engine and sat there a second because I needed to be sure before I opened the door that my face wouldn't break. I stepped out, and she stepped toward me and then stopped. She was looking over my shoulder. Her eyes narrowed at the car, then widened in a way I had seen only a handful of times. She lifted her arm and pointed past me without taking her gaze off the rear window. "Who is that?" she asked. I turned because reflex is older than reason. The back seat window was an ordinary rectangle of glass with a thin line of dust at the edge of the rubber seal. Behind the glass, pressed so close that an imprint fogged a circle the size of a plate, there was a face. Calling it a face feels like a favor. It was red, not the red of paint or cartoon apples but the red of muscle, the red your mind tries not to picture. It had one big eye open, too big, round and wet and focused on nothing and everything, the lid glued back, the pupil wide. A seam where a mouth might be pulled tight against the glass as if it were smiling or trying to breathe through a crack. An arm rose in a slow, stiff arc, bent wrong in the middle like wire under skin, and the hand at the end, if that's what it was, unfolded and folded again in a movement close enough to a wave to make my scalp crawl. Then it was gone. Not a step back. Not a slide. Between one blink and the next, the red and the fog and the eye and the arm weren't there. The glass showed the back seat. The seatbelt hung out of its place. My own reflection looked like someone else. A soft blankness moved through me, and I sat down on the curb because my knees were tired, or because it seemed like the right place to be if the ground decided to climb up. Dana didn't sit. She stayed standing with her chin tilted in that way she gets when she's done being scared and found anger instead. "We're going back," she said, pointing toward the street like it would carry us there if she ordered it to. "We're going to the man who sold you this and you're getting your money back." I looked at her and nodded because it was something to do. It was a sentence we could carry between us like a box. The wind lifted a strand of her hair and stuck it to her lip, and she brushed it away with the back of her hand without looking away from the car. I stared at the rear window until my eyes watered. The glass showed me nothing. The car sat and waited and said nothing. Dana's voice softened a fraction. She set her hand on my shoulder and squeezed like she had when we stood at mile 22 in the marathon, and my legs, the ones she painted, shook in the sockets with effort, and the finish felt like a rumor. "Come on," she said. "Get up." I did. I stood on the painted fish and felt the small give in the fake ankles and the solid line where the carbon met the socket. I found my balance and looked at the car one more time because not looking felt like letting it win at something I didn't understand. "Okay," I said. "Let's go." We didn't have a plan yet. We didn't have anything except a name on a title and $1,000 less than I had yesterday, and the memory of a red face pressed flat to the glass as if it wanted to be closer than the glass would allow. But she was right. We would start with the man at the door who had taken the money with wet eyes and told me I wouldn't regret it. We would knock and ask and not accept a simple answer. We would say the word back until it meant something. I opened the driver's door and looked at the back seat first, because that's who I had become in the space of a day. Empty fabric. The seatbelt, twisted at the top. A stray receipt from the DMV half slid between the seat and the cushion because nothing stays where you put it. The smell of airbag powder still faint in the front. The quiet crackle of the cooling engine ticking just a little. Dana got in beside me and buckled up without looking away from her own thoughts, each click of the buckle louder than it should be. She rested her hand on my forearm, warm and steady the way she had been from the start. I started the car. The engine turned over on the first try and held. We pulled into the street, both of us watching the road ahead and both of us, I think, listening for a whisper we didn't want to hear. I know people say Christmas is the most wonderful time of the year, but for me it has always been Halloween. I love how the air changes. I love the early darkness, the smell of leaves and cold earth, the way candles make small islands of warm light in the room. Every year I take out a box of fake cobwebs and rubber spiders and hang them across the picture frames. I put little paper bats on the wall so they look like they are flying toward the hallway. I line the porch with 2, 3, sometimes 4 jack-o'-lanterns so the steps glow. We sit inside and tell spooky stories and eat too much candy and pretend we might see something from the other side if we look hard enough. My daughter loves our stories most of all. Last year was no different. We were at the kitchen table with newspapers spread out to catch the mess, and 2 round pumpkins waiting for us. We cut off the tops and scraped out the stringy insides with big spoons. The bowl filled up fast with wet seeds. The smell was sweet and raw. She kept leaning over to draw faces on her pumpkin with a marker, big eyes, a mouth with sharp teeth like a cartoon monster. Her hair kept falling into her face, and she'd push it back with her wrist, leaving a little orange smear on her cheek. She looked up at me with a grin. "Is it time yet?" she asked. "Time for stories?" "All right," I said. "Where should we start?" "How about the monkey's paw?" She wrinkled her nose. "Not that one. That's an old one. Tell me something new." Okay. I glanced out the window. The moon slid behind a cloud and the kitchen seemed to lean closer to the candles we hadn't lit yet. "I've got one." We scooped and carved and I began. "Once upon a time," I said, "there was a boy named Jacob. He lived with his father in a little house on the edge of a forest. People in the village knew his father well, because his father was the doctor. One night the father came into Jacob's room and woke him from a deep sleep. He said, 'My son, I have to go out. A woman in the village is about to have a baby, and I must be there.'" Her hands slowed as she listened. She knew how I told these, steady, simple, one step at a time. Jacob sat up and rubbed his eyes. I went on. He said, "But father, what about the wolf? People had seen a big wolf in the forest that year. It had come close to the fields. It had taken chickens and scared the cows. The villagers were afraid. They told their children not to play by the trees after sunset." Jacob had heard the stories. When the floor creaked at night, when branches scraped the roof, he thought of the wolf and his stomach felt tight. His father smiled in the dark. He said, "Don't be afraid. I'll lock the doors and the windows, and you'll be safe. I won't be long." So he tucked his son in, and he checked the latches, and he left with his bag and his coat. Jacob tried to sleep, but every sound was louder than before. The wind made the old chimney moan. The house settled with small pops. He took his blanket off the bed and made a little nest by the front window where he could see the road. He told himself he would stay awake, but his eyes kept closing. The full moon was high, and its light came through the glass like a pale hand. The smells of wet leaves and pine needles drifted in through a poorly shut crack and made him think of the cold under the trees. He dozed and woke and dozed again. After some time he saw a light. Headlights turned at the bend and swept across the yard. It was his father's car. Jacob felt joy like warm tea after a long day. He ran to the door. He pulled it open and stepped outside. His father, still in the car, saw something else. A large wolf ran out of the house and across the yard, straight toward him. Its fur was dark and thick. Its mouth was open, and the teeth shone wet in the light. He didn't even have time to shout before there was a shot. The sound cracked like the sky tearing. The wolf staggered and fell. Men came out of the trees at the edge of the yard. They were the men from the village with their guns. They had made a hunting party to end the fear. They had followed the tracks through the mud. They had seen the house and the open door and the wolf at the top of the steps and fired. They lowered their guns and started to cheer. Then they heard the doctor yell. It was a sound they had never heard from him, a broken sound. He ran from his car to the fallen animal, and he dropped to his knees. He gathered the big body in his arms like it was a child. Right then, in front of them, the wolf changed. The fur thinned and sank away. The paws curled and became hands. The long muzzle shortened and faded. When the villagers stepped closer, they saw the truth. The wolf was gone. Only a boy lay in the doctor's arms, a boy with hair stuck to his forehead, a boy with a small scar by his eyebrow, a boy the doctor loved. I stopped there for a breath. My daughter's eyes were wide and shiny in the kitchen light. So the doctor's son was the wolf? She said softly. That's sad. I guess it is, I said. Some scary things are also sad. Sometimes they're both at the same time. We finished the carving. She held up her pumpkin proudly. The mouth was crooked the way she liked it. I lit 2 small candles and set them inside. The faces glowed like they were alive. We turned off the kitchen light and carried the jack-o'-lanterns into the living room and put them on the low table. The room looked different right away. Shadows stretched and made corners look deeper. She reached for the TV remote, but after 2 minutes of a cartoon ghost she was already bored. Her attention slid back to the table, to the dusty deck of tarot cards that had lived there for years. Tell me my future, she said. I laughed a little. I don't like to use those anymore, I said. But I can tell you another story. About the cards? Not exactly. But there's a magician in it, and he does use cards sometimes. This one is called Smoke and Mirrors. She curled into my side and tucked her feet under the blanket. I put my arm around her, and the scent of pumpkin and candle wax was warm and soft. Once upon a time there was a man, I said. He was not famous. He did magic tricks at children's parties and small shows in small rooms. He liked to see people smile. He practiced a lot, but he was not very good. When he pulled a coin from behind someone's ear, the person saw how he hid it. When he shuffled a deck and switched a card, people caught the moment. He wore a suit that was too big and a bow tie that was always just a little crooked. He kept going anyway. He thought, I will get better if I keep trying. One morning, eating toast in his tiny kitchen, he opened the newspaper and saw an advertisement. The letters were big and bold and simple, like someone wanted to be sure he did not miss them. Free Teo Good Home, the words said. Pair of magic cabinets. Amaze your audience. There was a phone number, and nothing else. He could not believe his luck. Big stage props were expensive. He would never be able to buy anything like that. He called right away. A man answered and told him to come that afternoon. The magician borrowed a van and drove across town. The house was old. The porch creaked. The man who opened the door had tired eyes and a careful voice. He led the magician to a back room. The cabinets stood side by the wall. They were tall, at least as tall as the magician, and each had 6 sides like a honeycomb. Every outside face was a mirror. When you moved, the room moved with you. The doors at the front were heavy but swung open without a sound. Inside, the walls were lined with black velvet so dark your eyes sank into it. The magician touched it, and felt something like a chill go through his hands. Why are you giving them away? The magician asked. He was ready to hand over the little money he had in his pocket. I have no use for them anymore, the man said. He didn't explain. He went into another room and came back with a metal cage. A green parrot sat on the perch and tilted its head as if it was curious to see what would happen next. The man opened the first cabinet and slid the cage inside. He closed the door. He walked to the second cabinet and knocked 3 times. Welcome back, he said. like he was introducing an important guest. Hissing smoke coiled from the cracks around the first door. The man opened the second cabinet. The parrot stood in its cage inside and blinked at them. "These are marvelous," the magician said. His voice shook. He helped carry the cabinets to the van. As they lifted the second one, the man spoke again. "One word of caution," he said. "When I got them, I was told never to use a human being for this trick. Only animals. I would buy a parrot if I were you." The magician nodded. He did not ask why. He just kept nodding. He drove away with the cabinets, and the thought that his life had changed. His show changed that week. He set up the cabinets at the back of the small stage. During the party, he told the kids to come up and touch them. He said, "Look all you want. Tap the mirrors. Knock on the wood. There is no trap door." He saved the cabinets for the end. When it was time, he put his rabbit in the first cabinet, knocked on the second, said "Welcome back," and watched smoke roll from the seams. When he opened the second door, the rabbit sat there on its little blanket, wiggling its nose. People clapped. Children screamed in delight. Parents leaned forward. Even if they knew the coin trick, they did not know this. The magician's phone started ringing. He got more shows. He did 2 parties in one day and slept on the couch with a smile. He bought a goldfish, and that worked too, bowl and all. He followed the rule. He never used a person. He told himself it was because the man had warned him, but really it was because something in his stomach turned over when he imagined a friend stepping inside. One Saturday, a big birthday party filled the room. Balloons bobbed at the ceiling. Paper hats kept falling off children's heads and making them laugh. The magician did his card tricks and his scarf tricks and his coin behind the ear trick. He felt brave. He looked toward the corner where he kept the rabbit. The cage was open. The rabbit was gone. Maybe the door had not latched. Maybe a child had wanted to pet it. It didn't matter. His heart thumped. He could not show an empty cabinet. The audience had waited all show for this. "We can use me," a voice called. A tall man with strong arms stood up from the back near the cake table. He had a friendly face. He winked. Everyone looked at the magician. The room was alive and excited. The magician smiled like he had planned it this way. He swallowed his fear. "All right," he said. "If you don't mind, sir." The man stepped into the first cabinet. He squeezed his shoulders a little to fit. The magician closed the door. He walked across the small stage. He knocked on the second cabinet. "Welcome back," he said, louder than usual. Smoke curled from the first door. The second door swung open. The tall man stepped out, a bit pale, a bit dazed, but smiling and fine. The room clapped and shouted. Someone said, "How did you do that?" and the magician only bowed. He told himself it had been lucky. He told himself he would not do it again. He did it again. People asked to try. They begged. He saw how the trick looked with a real person and how big the reaction was. He told himself that one time with the rabbit missing was an accident and the rest would be safe. He told himself he needed the money. He told himself the cabinets were just cabinets, and a rule is only a rule until you test it. For months he used volunteers. Sometimes a nervous teenager. Sometimes a mother who wanted to show her kids she was brave. Sometimes an old man with a cheeky grin. He did 2 shows a day on weekends. He slept easy and woke up feeling lucky. Then one night he sat on his second-hand sofa with a plate of noodles and saw a face on the news. The tall man. The first volunteer. The headline made the noodles go cold. The man had killed his family. It was not a mistake. It was not an accident. He had done something terrible in his kitchen with a knife. The news showed a photo from a holiday. 2 children. A woman smiling. The magician put his plate on the coffee table because his hands were shaking. He did not sleep. The next morning he called the prison and asked to visit the man. He didn't know what he would say. He only knew he could not carry the questions alone. He sat behind thick glass with a phone in his hand. The man from the cabinet came in wearing a prison uniform. He sat and picked up the phone and smiled like they were old friends. "You may not remember me," the magician said. "Oh, I know you," the man said. "I've been hoping you would come." His voice was calm and warm. "Thank you." "For what?" "For welcoming me back into the world," the man said. "I don't understand," the magician said. "It is cooler here," the man said, and his smile changed into something thin and sharp. "So many chances. So many doors. We were waiting a long time." "Why did you do it?" the magician asked. "What happened in the box?" The man laughed. It was not a pleasant sound. It crawled along the magician's spine and made him want to put the phone down. "You did not know," the man said. "You little fool. Your cabinets are not tricks. They are doors. We cannot fit into parrots or goldfish or rabbits, but give us a human body and we can come through. We watched you. We waited. How many people stepped inside? How many did you give us?" The magician tried to count. Parties. Fairs. Even a small theater once when a friend got him a short slot between two comedians. He stopped counting when he reached 100. He whispered the number. "At least," the man said, and put the phone down and stood and walked away. I let the silence after that settle for a moment. In the glow from the pumpkins, my daughter looked very serious. "So there were 100 demons in the world?" she asked. "At least," I said, trying to smile, like we had told a joke so we could move on from the heavy part. I don't think the magician's math was very good. He wasn't a numbers person. She yawned. It was getting late. The cartoons were off. The candles burned lower, and the pumpkins' faces looked sleepy. I stood and turned down the flames. The room felt cooler at once. We walked upstairs together. The wooden steps creaked in the old way they always did, like the house had its own quiet language. In her room I pulled back the blanket, and she slid under it and pulled it up to her chin. She reached for my hand. "Tell me the Halloween story," she said. "Which one is that?" I teased. "The hitchhiker with no face? The lady in the white dress by the lake?" "The Halloween one," she said, and giggled into her pillow like she had told a secret. "All right," I said. "Are you sure you won't have bad dreams?" She shook her head hard. I smoothed her hair back and began. "Once upon a time there was a queen," I said. "She was kind. She lived in a big castle on a hill above a small town. People came to her when they needed help. She listened. Her husband, the king, was not kind. He was mean and sharp as a broken plate. He was angry at little things. One day, when the queen said something he did not like, he pushed her down the stone stairs. She fell and lay at the bottom in pain. She lived, but the fall hurt her in a way that meant she could never have children of her own. She had always loved children. Every year, on Halloween, she opened the castle gates and invited every child from the town to come. She hung hundreds of carved pumpkins and lit thousands of candles. The halls glowed. The tables were heavy with sweet treats. The children ran and laughed and played games. They went home with sticky fingers and happy faces. The queen stood on the balcony and watched them and felt like her heart was full. Years passed. The king died. You might think the queen would be glad, but she was not. She was lonely. The big castle was too quiet. She stood at the window and listened to her footsteps echo. She looked down at the children in the courtyard and felt something change. Their laughter, which used to make her smile, now sounded like someone scraping a fork on a plate. She felt bitter and cold. Her heart, once soft, felt hard. Halloween came again. She told the cooks and the maids to take the day off. "I will make the treats myself," she said. She baked cookies with butter and sugar and eggs and vanilla. She boiled sugar and made caramel and poured it over apples. She melted chocolate and dipped strawberries. She made little cakes and big cakes and candies in the shape of pumpkins and bats. And when the trays were full and the kitchen smelled like a dream, she took out one more ingredient that did not belong. Rat poison. She mixed it into the sugar. There was sugar in everything. That night the children came to the castle. They ran up the steps in their costumes and shouted with joy when they saw the tables. They ate and ate. They thanked the Queen. At the end of the night their parents came and took them home. The Queen stood in a dark hallway with her hand on the wall and listened to the last voices fade. She did not go to bed. That was a terrible night. Many children woke up sick. Some did not wake up at all. Sirens cut the air. Lights flashed in windows. Parents ran into the street in their pajamas. They called for help in voices that did not sound human. I paused. I tucked the blanket up around her shoulder. She was already almost asleep. Often she made it to the end. Often she would say, "And that's why I'm not allowed to go trick-or-treating, right, Mommy?" And I would nod and kiss her forehead. This time her breathing was slow and even. I kissed her forehead anyway. I turned off the lamp and stood in the doorway. The hallway felt cold. The clock on the mantel downstairs began to strike. I counted under my breath. 12. The sound pulled me backward into a memory I never talk about. Not to anyone. Not even to myself, most days. A Halloween night 6 years ago. Not a story. Sirens. Flashing lights. The smell of smoke and wet leaves and something metal. Parents in the street with their hands on their heads, or on their knees, or on each other. My neighbor, the one who always waved when he drove by, running down his steps with his little boy in his arms. The pumpkin on their porch tipped and rolled and burst on the sidewalk. The sound the father made when he looked up at the night and tried to call to it. That sound still lives in the part of my chest that never gets warm. The police tape. The questions. The answers no one wanted. People shook their heads and said the word crazy. People put candles on porches and teddy bears on steps. People blamed candy from strangers because that made more sense than the truth, which was smaller and closer and worse. I stood on my own porch and could not move for a long time. The jack-o'-lantern I had carved that afternoon smiled into the empty street. The last strike of the clock faded. The house settled into the kind of quiet you only hear when the whole neighborhood sleeps. I turned back to look into my daughter's room. The bed was empty. For a second my mind did the simple thing and said, she went to the bathroom. Then the other part of my mind, the part that knows our house like a map, told me I would have heard the door. I stood there and felt the cold slide across my skin. I did not turn on the light. I did not step inside. We have our rules. We built them over time without saying them. We do not rush the moment. We do not try to hold it down. We do not ask why. The witching hour had come and gone. Our special day was over. It comes only once a year. We sit. We carve. We tell our stories. We light our pumpkins. We turn off the lamp and walk upstairs and tuck in, and for a while I can pretend the world is the way it used to be. I can feel her hand tug at my sleeve and say, "Another one, Mommy? Please." I can laugh. I can make my voice soft. I can say, "Once upon a time," and know the ending, even if it hurts. I can be the person she remembers me to be. Downstairs the pumpkin's candles burned to small puddles and went out one after the other. On the porch, the night pressed its face to the window like a curious child. Somewhere far away a dog barked once and went quiet. I stood long enough that my legs ached, and then I went into my bedroom and lay on top of the blankets, and stared at the ceiling until morning came. When the sun reached the window I got up, washed my face, and took the jack-o'-lanterns to the yard. The faces looked different in daylight. Everything does. Sometimes I tell myself that next year we will skip the decorations. We will skip the stories. I will not take the tarot deck out of the drawer. I will not light the candles. I will not say, "Once upon a time." I will let the night pass like any other night, and I will not listen for a small voice at the table asking, "Is it time yet?" I say this to the mirror while I brush my teeth, and I nod like I mean it. But when October comes, I always open the box and take out the fake spiders and the cobwebs and the paper bats. I put the pumpkins on the steps. I buy candles that smell like cinnamon and warm sugar. I spread newspaper on the table and I cut the round lids and scoop the seeds into the big bowl. I look up when I feel the air stir, and I smile without thinking. I say, "Where should we start?" And her voice, small and sure, says, "Something new." And for one night, in the soft light of our jack-o'-lanterns, the house feels full again. I grew up in a nowhere town that most maps forgot. We had one diner, one gas station that never changed its price sign because nobody passed through anyway, and one park. The park had a duck pond, a broken seesaw that never got fixed, and a vintage carousel that had been there longer than any of us could remember. Folks said it came from some traveling carnival back in the day, and nobody ever came to take it away. The paint on it stayed bright no matter how hard the sun cooked it in July, or how long the snows sat on it in January. The organ music still worked, too. It played the same cheerful loop from morning till late afternoon when the old man shut everything down. The old man sat in the middle booth like he had grown out of the floor. He had a soft hat in summer, a knit cap in winter, and a brown coat that might have been part of him. His cheeks were thin and his eyes crinkled when he smiled, which he did often. It wasn't a big smile. It was a polite little curl that said he saw you and didn't mind that you were there. He watched the horses go around and around all day. I never saw him stand unless he was helping a toddler onto a saddle or taking a crumpled dollar from a parent and handing back change, coins clinking into a chip saucer. Sometimes, if he saw me and my friend Billy hanging close by, he'd raise a couple fingers from his lap like a quiet wave. It made me feel seen in a way I didn't know I needed. There wasn't much else to do. We were both 15 that spring, and when homework ended and dinner wasn't ready yet, we drifted to the park like leaves against a fence. We'd lean on the railing and watch the carousel go. Billy had a talent for nicknames and for trouble. He'd squint at the old man and say things like, "There's Horse's Ass, King of the Ponies," or "Prick Draw McGraw, Ruler of the Round and Round." I rolled my eyes and laughed, because that was our rhythm. He pushed lines. I pretended I didn't like it and stayed anyway. The horses themselves were the best part. Each one was different. Some had their heads thrown back like they were laughing at the sky. Some stretched forward like they were racing for a finish line only they could see. A black stallion had a gold bridle and a red saddle. A white mare had blue roses carved into her mane. There was even a lion with a brass ring through its nose and a fish with scales painted in green and silver. Whoever carved them had loved them. You could tell. I made up stories about them when I was alone. The black stallion used to belong to a girl who could ride without holding the reins. The white mare had once galloped beside the ocean, so the painter gave her waves in her mane. The lion had broken loose from a circus cage and leapt and roared and stared down the crowd. I didn't tell Billy those stories. He would have laughed. We saw the old man smile so often that we started to think we could read it. He had a smile for babies who waved when they went by. He had a smile for teenagers who rolled their eyes and paid anyway because nostalgia tastes sweet. He had a smile for the moms who needed 3 minutes to breathe while their kids circled. There was a smile for us too, the one you give stray dogs that aren't yours but live under your porch. Something like that. It was late one spring afternoon when he surprised us. We were leaning on the peeling white rail, doing what we always did, when the organ stopped mid-note. The carousel slowed. The horses went from a blur to a parade to still statues with their mouths open and their eyes shining with a light that wasn't light. The old man stood up, which felt like watching a tree get up and walk. He opened the door of his little booth and came out. His boots thumped hollow on the planks. He lifted a hand and waved us over. Up close, he looked older than he did from the rail. The skin on his hands was thin and speckled. His nails were clean. His eyes were a clear gray. He nodded at the horses like they were friends. "This carousel sure is a beauty, ain't it?" he said. His voice had a soft rasp to it, like dry leaves. "Say, you boys ever hear the old story about why each horse is so darn pretty?" "Never heard any story worth hearing in this town," Billy said. He got that grin that made teachers nervous. "Go on, enlighten us." The old man leaned back against the side of a horse with a blue ribbon carved around its neck. He looked down the line at the others and then back at us. "Well now, he said. Some folks say each of these critters is alive in its own way. Not like a dog or a person. Different. They say you only see their true shape if you switch on the power after dark. Why else you think I never run her at night? That's a big load, Billy said. He didn't say the whole word. He didn't need to. He smirked. I felt heat creep up my neck because I didn't like disrespect, even if the town had taught us it was how you got through the day. The old man just gave us his usual small grin. You boys best head on home. Supper time's coming and I got to close up. We didn't go home. When the old man clamped down the safety bar and turned off the main switch and closed the little door to his booth, we moved to the far side of the carousel and watched him leave. He turned once at the gate and did the two-finger wave. The sunlight slid behind the trees and the park started to look the way it looks right before all the colors drain out. We waited on the bench by the pond so the ducks would make it look like we had a reason to be there. Then we waited some more. The way dusk turns to night in a small town is slow, like someone is rolling a blanket up over the sky. When the street lamps buzzed on one by one, we got up. Billy had a plan. Billy always had a plan. He leaves the key in there sometimes, he said. Saw him do it more than once. He's old. He forgets things. He gave me a look like a dare. You coming? I'm coming, I said. My mouth was dry. We moved quiet around the back side where the fence was lower. The boards creaked when we climbed, and I winced. If you grow up in a small place, you learn all its noises. That creak was the one that meant a board would give if you stepped in the wrong spot. We made it over anyway. The paint under my palm felt cool and sticky. Up close, at night, the horses didn't look friendly. The organ pipes stood like thin, silver trees, and even though they weren't playing, I almost heard music. The booth door was shut but not locked. Billy lifted the latch with 2 fingers and I pushed. The old switchboard sat in front of us with its metal levers and round buttons and a dial with worn numbers around it. On the right side, under a clear cover, there was a key in the ignition. Someone had tied a piece of string to it so it wouldn't get lost. The other end of the string was tacked to the wood. See? Billy whispered. He pulled the cover up and turned the key halfway. A soft hum ran under our feet like a big cat purring in the dark. Maybe we shouldn't, I said, which was my job in our 2-man act. Maybe we should, he said, which was his. He grinned and rested his hand over the biggest lever. Giddy up. He pushed the lever down. The hum grew louder. The floor vibrated. The round platform shivered and then began to move. It was slow at first. The horses began to slide past like they were waking up. The organ coughed. Billy turned the dial 2 notches toward a word that said evening. The organ caught and then started to play. The song was cheerful in the daylight. At night it sounded like someone smiling too wide. It made the hair on my arms stand up. I stepped out of the booth and into the open center so I could see everything. Billy stayed by the board with his hand on the lever like the captain of a ship that had nowhere to sail. We didn't notice the screams right away. I know how that sounds. If you've never heard a scream from a human throat, I hope you never do. It's not like the movies. It's thinner and rawer at the same time. But the organ was loud and right beside us, and the wind decided to run a lap around the park, and for a second I thought the sound was part of the song. I looked around for kids on the outside fence. The park was empty. The path was empty. The duck pond was a flat, dark plate. The carousel spun. The horses went by. I saw the black stallion, the white mare, the lion, the fish. I saw them all again and again until the world felt like a circle. There's a kind of blind you get when you look right at something and your mind doesn't let you see it. I've had that blind before. I had it the day they backed a tow truck up to my mom's car and took it away and she said, "We'll walk for a while. It's good for us." I had it when a teacher put a test on my desk upside down and said, "Take your time." And I knew she meant, "You're going to fail and I am trying to be kind." I had it now. The horses blurred. The organ blared. The smell of old grease and wood polish and dust came up like a wave. I blinked hard, and then the blind on my mind snapped, and there it was. It wasn't horses. On each pole where a horse should have been, there was a person. The poles went right through them. Some had the metal spike through the chest. Some had it through the belly. One had it through the back and out the shoulder, so his head hung at a wrong angle and his mouth was open like he was trying to catch the night air. Their arms hung. Their legs hung. Their clothes were from different times. A woman in a green dress that looked old-fashioned. A man in a t-shirt from the bowling alley team. A boy in a hoodie I recognized from school, even though the face above it was gray and wrong. They were moving because the carousel moved. The poles turned them. The motion made it worse. The screams, thin and high, rode the organ music. Some voices were low and moaning. Some were sharp. Altogether it sounded like the sound the world would make if it could cry. I couldn't breathe. My knees went soft. I grabbed the side of the booth to hold myself up. Billy shouted something I couldn't hear and shoved the lever up. It didn't change anything. He slammed his palm on buttons. The organ got louder, and then softer, and then louder. The carousel kept going. The faces turned past me again and again, and I found more things to recognize when I didn't want to. A woman from the diner who had always given me an extra packet of ketchup. Her hair was still up in a clip. Mr. Klein, who had fixed my bike chain last summer and didn't charge me. His eyes were closed. A little kid with a missing front tooth. He had drawn on his sneakers with a marker, and the ink had bled into the canvas. The boy in the hoodie. He used to hang near the back entrance of the grocery store and ask if you could spare a cigarette. People said he had left town. People said a lot of things. There was one more I knew. It took me too long to know because everything was wrong with him. He was always the first person to wake at our house, and the last to sit down. He had hands that could fix a leaky pipe and pull a splinter with a safety pin and open a jar when even the warm water trick failed. He had a smile that he kept in his pocket and took out only when there was sunlight and extra time. He had stopped coming home late last autumn. He had stopped coming home at all. When Mom stood at the sink and stared out the window at nothing, I knew she was seeing him walking up the path the way he used to, like his boots could make the house stand up straighter. I saw his boots first. They were on his feet. The leather was cracked where the toes bent. The laces were double knotted. The rest of him came into view like a camera pulling focus. He was on a pole across from me, facing me. The metal came up through his shirt just below the ribs. His head was down, and then it lifted because the pole turned it that way. His eyes opened. He looked at me. For a second, in between one note of the organ and the next, in between one scream and the next, there was just his face. He didn't smile. He didn't frown. He saw me, and that was enough to rip something out of me that I didn't know I still had. I stumbled back into the booth and grabbed at Billy's wrist. His skin was slick. "Turn it off," I said. My voice sounded like it was coming from the bottom of a well. "Turn it off, turn it off, turn it off." "What the hell do you think I'm trying to do?" he shouted. His words were thin and broke in the middle. He pushed the lever all the way up. He yanked the key. He slammed it back. He twisted the dial and the word night glowed for a second and then went out. The hum under our feet didn't change. The organ dipped and then roared back. We were in the center of it, and there was nowhere to go. If you've been in the middle of a storm, you know how small it makes you. If you haven't, you will, someday. You think your plans and your important thoughts and your clever words will help. They don't. You hold on to something and you try not to let your heart fly out of your chest like a bird that wants to smash itself on the windows. Over the noise, over the spinning, over the moving faces, I heard a laugh. It wasn't loud. The organ and the screaming were loud. This laugh cut through in a different way. It was like hearing your name whispered on the other side of a door. It came from behind us. We turned as one. The old man stood by the outer rail under the shadow of the lion. He had his hands in his coat pockets. His hat was tipped back on his head. His smile was the same small curl, only it had more in it now. It had teeth. The carousel light, if you could call it that, reflected in his eyes like a pair of coins. "Reckon there's room for a couple more?" he called. His voice carried easy, like a song you know by heart. Billy swore. He left the board and lunged to the booth door. I grabbed him, because a part of me had the thought that if he ran full speed for the edge, he would step wrong and fall, and the carousel would take him the way it took everything. He shook me off. He was stronger than me when he wanted to be. The old man didn't move. He didn't come closer. He didn't need to. Maybe he had been waiting for years. Maybe he had been waiting since before I was born. Maybe he had been waiting since the day the carousel arrived on a flatbed, and a handful of men in work shirts bolted it down on the concrete. Maybe his waiting was older than the park, older than the town, older than the road on the map. That smile said he could wait forever. Billy did what Billy always did when a situation went sideways. He punched. He didn't punch the old man. He punched the nearest thing that felt like it could be blamed. He swung at the dial and the glass over the key. The glass cracked and cut his knuckles. He pulled hard on the key and it broke off in his hand with a sharp sound. He hurled the broken piece across the booth. It clinked. The carousel kept spinning. "Stop!" I shouted at the old man, like he was a dog that had followed me home. "Please!" He tilted his head at me. "I told you boys to go home before dark," he said. "I did my part. Now you're doing yours." "What is this?" I asked. The words came out thin. "What is this?" "This is the way of things," he said. "This is why she's so pretty." He patted the nearest pole with his palm like you would pat a horse's neck. "Paint peels. Music breaks. Wood gets soft. Not here. Not if she stays fed." He looked at me and a bit of apology slid over his face like a cloud over the moon. "I like you boys. I do. But the town likes the carousel more." A shape moved at the edge of my vision, and I saw a woman standing under a tree near the path. She had a stroller. Another person stood farther back by the bench. More people stood on the sidewalk. Their faces were pale in the light from the street lamp. They watched. Some had their hands together. Some had their arms crossed. Some looked down at their shoes. None of them shouted. None of them ran. None of them crossed the grass to help. The carousel turned, and the faces on it turned, and the town looked at its reflection and pretended it saw something else. I don't know how long we were there. Time stretched and snapped, stretched and snapped. I remember the organ stopping once and starting again right away like it had just taken a breath. I remember the boy in the hoodie looking at me one full turn and looking away the next like he couldn't do it again. I remember Billy saying my name like he had never said it before, and then saying it again. The world made a choice. It spit us out of the middle. The hum died. The organ cut off in the middle of a bright note so fast that the air in the booth seemed to pop. The platform slowed. The faces went by slower, and then they were the horses again, standing still in their right places with their right saddles. The smell of dust felt normal again, and the lights from the street came in at the same angles they always did. My ears rang. I could hear my own breath and the sound of the old man's boots when he shifted his weight. We were shaking when we climbed down from the booth. My legs didn't want to hold me. Billy had blood on his knuckles and didn't know it. The old man watched us with that same not quite sorry look. "You should go on now," he said. "It's late." "What happens if we tell?" I asked. It was a question a child asks when she is testing whether the world will hurt her for being honest. He scratched his cheek with his thumb. "People don't see what they don't want to," he said. "You tell them you saw something strange, they'll tell you a story about kids and late nights and making things up. They'll say the old man at the carousel is a harmless fool who sits in a booth all day and feeds ducks sometimes on his lunch break. They'll pat your shoulder and send you home." He lifted a hand and pointed at the nearest horse. "They want their kids to ride on pretty things. They want their town to have something to be proud of. They want to believe what they can believe. Same as you do." Was my... I started and stopped. The word Dad stuck to my tongue like a thorn. "Was he..." I pressed my lips together and forced the rest out. Was he here long? The old man's eyes went soft. Time don't work normal on a carousel, he said. Round and round is different from back and forth. That's not an answer, I said. It's the only one I can give, he said. He looked over my shoulder at the people under the tree. You boys go on. Don't come back after dark. We crossed the grass to the fence and climbed over. My hands felt numb. Billy didn't look back. I looked back because I always do. The old man had gone into his booth. The carousel stood still. The horses looked beautiful in the lamplight. You could write a whole life on the difference between how something looks and what it is. We didn't talk as we walked home. A siren sounded far away and cut off. A dog barked once and went quiet. The town looked like it always did at that hour. Empty streets, square windows with curtains drawn, a porch light left on for someone running late. When I reached my house, the porch light was on. Mom had left the screen door unlatched and the real door locked. That's how she did it when she was half asleep in her chair and didn't want to get up if I came in late. I slipped the screen and used my key. Inside, the TV glowed with a home makeover show where a couple learned to love a kitchen they couldn't afford. Mom slept in the chair with a blanket up to her chin. I stood there and watched her breathe until my breath matched hers. I didn't sleep much. When I closed my eyes, I saw the boy in the hoodie look at me and then look away. I saw the old man's smile with teeth in it. I saw my dad's boots, laces double knotted. When I woke, light hurt for a minute, and then everything slid into place like cards being squared. I went to school and sat in a classroom and wrote answers to questions I didn't care about. At lunch, I sat across from Billy and we chewed our sandwiches without tasting them. He kept his hurt hand in his hoodie pocket. Nobody asked about it. Nobody asked us anything. The world went on because that's what the world knows how to do. Over the weeks after that night, I watched the park in a way I hadn't before. I saw the old man at the booth with his hat and his small smile. I saw children line up with quarters and parents dig for bills and grandparents take photos. I heard the organ music until I knew every squeak in it. I watched the way people glanced up at the street lamps if the sky got too dim, and how the old man started to turn off the lights a little earlier than he had in the spring. I watched him watch the sky, and I understood the weather in a new way. When a storm rolled over and rain made the sidewalk shine, he kept the carousel dark. When a cloud lingered and made 6 o'clock look like 8, he closed early. When the sun stayed late and made 8 look like 6, he kept it going and smiled at the sigh that ran through the parents when he did. I saw something else too. Little flyers on the bulletin board at the grocery store went from "Lost Cat" and "Yard Sale" to "Missing" in black letters with a photo under it. Sometimes the paper curled on the edges and someone came and took it down and nobody asked why. People said the freeway made it easy to leave. People said there are always drifters. People said maybe he just wanted a different life. People said she went to the city for work. People said and said and said. One evening in late summer, I stood by the fence and watched a girl of about 3 hold onto the pole with both hands as her father walked beside her with his hand hovering near her knee in case she slipped. Her mouth was a roundo. Her hair was in 2 messy pigtails. The organ played. The old man smiled from his booth with the window half open. A breeze moved through and brought a smell of cut grass. The sky was the kind of blue you only see in old postcards. It was perfect. It was sweet. It was the kind of moment you could take a picture of and put on a flyer that said "Our Town" in cheerful letters. I felt something turn over inside of me. It wasn't anger exactly. Anger is hot and quick and burns out. This was colder and steady. It felt like the first time you realize that all grown-ups are just older kids and nobody is coming to carry anything for you. I stepped away from the fence. I went home and ate dinner and washed the plates without being asked. Mom looked at me with a question in her eyes and didn't ask it out loud. We watched a game show and guessed answers and both got most of them wrong. It felt normal in a way that made my chest hurt. That night I dreamed about a carousel that had no horses and no people and no music. It stood in the park and the wind blew dust and leaves across it, and it faded and cracked, and the paint peeled and fell in flakes and made bright confetti on the ground. The old man sat in the booth anyway with his hands folded and a new hat I had never seen. He looked content. In the morning I couldn't tell if the dream had been a wish or a warning. We never went back after dark. Not when we were 15. Not when we were 16. When I got my license, I drove past the park slowly in the evening and saw the street lamps blink on, and the old man look up at the sky the way a farmer looks and then start to count the cash for the day. When I got a job down at the hardware store, I walked through the park on my break and watched a little boy drop his ice cream and cry, and watched his mother bend to wipe his face and tell him she would get another. Small mercies. They keep a town going as much as small cruelties do. I told Billy once that we could do something. He asked me what? I didn't have a good answer. He said, exactly, and punched my shoulder and changed the subject to a used dirt bike he wanted to buy. Years passed the way they do. I left for a while and came back. Some of my friends stayed and got jobs and had kids who rode the carousel on Saturday afternoons. The old man got older and then, somehow, he didn't. He always had. When he wasn't in the booth one day and a woman with gray hair and a bright scarf sat there instead, people said he'd retired. People brought her cookies and she put them on a plate beside her and smiled the way he had. Every time I walk past now, I think I hear a scream under the music. It's probably in my head. The mind stores sounds the way it stores smells, and certain chords pull certain drawers open. The organ plays and my skin remembers, the way a scar aches when rain is coming. I look at the horses and I see what everyone sees. I try not to blink too hard and see what I saw. Some days I do. Some days I don't. That feels like its own choice, and maybe it is, and maybe it isn't. People ask me sometimes why I don't take my own kid to the park. I shrug and say we go to the lake instead, or the library story hour, or nowhere at all because we stayed home and made pancakes for dinner like it was a holiday. They nod. They say, we should do that too. They say, we never make time for the simple things. They say, you can't beat that carousel though. The old things last forever. I say, that's true. I smile my small smile. I hope it doesn't look like his. Sorry to interrupt. If you're enjoying the story, let me know in the comments and tell me where you're watching from. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more. I sat across from the psychiatrist and watched the way his socks peered out from beneath the cuff of his slacks. They were long dress socks patterned with small red and blue squares, pulled up high above polished black shoes. The socks were the most psychiatrist thing about him. The rest, the simple office, the bare reception area I'd walked through, the quiet window facing a suburban strip of shops and trees, felt like any second-floor rental where the carpet doesn't quite match the walls and the air smells faintly of copy paper and coffee. Do you ever have thoughts about hurting yourself? He asked. No, I said. Have you ever thought about harming anyone else? Never. He leaned back in that green leather chair and steepled his fingers for a second, the way people do when they're trying not to make a face. He couldn't have been more than a few years older than me, mid-30s at most, and you could feel the sharpness in him, the way you feel a blade when you slide it into a sheath. Brown eyes that didn't miss much, neat jaw, no hesitation when he spoke. If you told me he was a prodigy who'd skipped grades and finished residencies early, I wouldn't have blinked. Good, he said. I believe you. And that's going to save us a lot of time. The day had lived in my head for weeks as a deadline and a finish line. I had dreaded it and reached for it. If this went well, I could finally step out of the circle I'd been walking since the police tape came down and the interviews began. If this went badly, I didn't let myself think about that. He flipped a page on his notepad. Before we start, is there anything you want to ask me? What number am I? I asked. He smiled with just the corner of his mouth. I'm the 7th. That sounds right, I said. No offense, but the routine gets old. I've told the same true story to the same skeptical faces so many times I can hear my own words before I say them. He didn't give me the tired half-smile I'd come to expect when I said things like that. He nodded once, like he really did understand. "I'm not here to trip you up," he said. "I'm not here to make you misspeak so I can write gotcha in the margin. I don't think you're a danger to anyone. I don't think you did what people are still whispering about. But I need you to help me understand enough that I can put my name on a report and close your file. That's how this ends." I sat up a little straighter. Somewhere under my ribs a hot thread ran from left to right, and then cooled again. "All right," I said. "If I give you everything exactly as I remember it, you'll sign whatever you need to sign, and I can go home and try to sleep like a normal person?" "That's exactly the plan," he said. "And this isn't my first rodeo, Ethan. You know that. If I hadn't seen just about everything a mind can do to itself, I wouldn't be sitting here." He had used my first name without making it sound like a trick. That helped. My fingers tightened around the wooden arms of the chair. I tried to keep my thoughts in one lane. I tried not to think about anything except the sequence of things as they happened, like I was reading a grocery list. "Start at the beginning," he said. "From the moment they arrived. Holly Bridges, Janet Christo, and Alex Hahn. It was around 5:30 in the evening." He said their names the way people say the names of cousins they saw last Christmas. He had done the homework. I could tell he knew the timeline and the receipts, and the statements as well as I did. "That's right," I said. "Holly came first. 20 minutes before the other two." "Right," he said, like he'd already marked that in his notes. "There's usually a reason that detail survives every retelling." "There is," I said. "Were you intimate with her?" he asked. He said it without judgment, the way a doctor asks if you have any allergies. I looked down at my hands, at the half-moon marks my nails had left in my skin sometime during the last month. I wasn't ready to sit inside the past tense version of Holly and me. But the point of today was not to hide. "Yes," I said. "That's why she came early. We wanted time alone." "Why isn't that in any of the police reports?" he asked. "Because it doesn't change what happened," I said. "Because I didn't want to hand the worst night of my life the extra weight of explaining my private life to strangers. It has nothing to do with the rest. Everything has something to do with everything in cases like this," he said. He let it go. "So, Janet and Alex arrived together. You were hosting a small dinner. Tell me about the kitchen, the food. Tell me the way you would tell a friend if we weren't sitting here." "Janet and Alex had been together 3 years," I said. "They just signed a lease on a new place, and I wanted to make a big deal out of it. I told them to kick their shoes off at the door. We stood in the kitchen while I checked the potatoes. I poured everyone wine." "What kind of wine?" he asked. "Australian red," I said. "I grabbed it because there were kangaroos on the label." "How much?" he asked, pencil already scratching. 30, I said automatically. He glanced down at his pad. "The receipt in your apartment says 85. "Really?" I blinked. "I don't even like wine. I must have been trying to impress them. Weird the things you forget, given what happened after." "Hard to remember," he said. "Or hard to be honest about." I looked at him. "Why would I lie about that?" I asked. He lifted a shoulder. "People lie about small things when the big thing in the middle of the room is too heavy to touch. It's not a charge, it's an observation. Let's keep going." My feet made little half circles against the floor. I knew where we were headed in the story, and there's a spot in my mind that always catches there, like a shirt snags on a nail. If I push my mind past it too fast, the snag rips and the tearing sound runs through me. If I try to go slow, sometimes I can keep the fabric whole. "The steaks were resting in the pan," I said. "Asparagus was steaming. I plated everything. I told them to sit at the table. I remember lighting 2 candles so the harsh overhead light wouldn't make the room feel like a waiting area. We talked about the new apartment, about whether Janet's commute would be better from there. We laughed. It was normal. He watched me like a person who sits with people for a living and knows when the pause is the point. Do you think there was something in the food? He asked. I'm not suggesting you put it there. I'm asking whether you've ever had the thought that something was wrong with what you bought. If there was, it came from a grocery store display of rosemary and sea salt, and all four of us would have fallen at the same time from the same thing, I said. But the tests didn't show anything like that. You know they didn't. And I ate what they ate. He nodded, then stood. Water? He asked. Sure, I said. Keep going, he said as he crossed to a small side table where two glasses sat next to a filtered pitcher. Tell me what happened next, even if you feel like you've told it too many times. Talk to me like I don't have the file in front of me. I stared past him for a second at the window. Outside, a thin overcast pressed down on the parking lot. The branches of a maple moved without making much sound. There was a calmness to the view that made the next part even harder to say out loud. It was just after 6, I said. We were eating. I thought the steaks were a little more done than I wanted, but no one complained. The potatoes were soft. The wine tasted like a mouthful of pennies to me, but everyone else liked it. We were talking about paint colors for their new place. There was no warning. None. Their faces went still, and then, like somebody cut a string that held them upright, they dropped. It always hits like heat behind my eyes. I could feel it gathering, lifting up into my skull. If I let it, it spreads into something else, and once that starts it takes everything I have to come back. I tried to keep my gaze on the simple things I could name: the curve of the desk, the edge of the notepad, the condensation gathering on the outside of the glass he held out to me. Tell me, he said softly from across the room. Tell me what you saw, not what you think about it now. Even the impossible needs a shape in speech. Their heads hit the plates, I said, the words scraping. We heard the crack of porcelain. Holly's glass tipped and bled into the tablecloth. It was very quiet after the sound. The burning came on hard. I pressed my fingertips into my temples like pressure could keep the next image from forming. If I could keep my mind fixed on the table, on the sound of the glass rolling, on the way the candle flame tilted in the draft from the vent, I might be able to keep from falling into the other place. But my mind moved anyway. It always did. I was on the pier again. Even before I allowed the picture to finish building, I felt the breeze that cooled my skin and the warmth of the sun on the back of my neck. I could hear the small repeated sound of water against wood and the dry caw of gulls. I could smell salt and damp rope. I tried to force it away and pull the office back into focus, but once the pier appears I always need a few seconds, and sometimes more, before I can stand on the plank and step backward out of it. No, I said through my teeth, clawing my way back to carpet and walls. They fell. All together. Not one and then the next. One sound. I know how it sounds when I say this. I know people believe in timing and coincidences until they're up against a thing that doesn't fit timing or coincidence. All I have is what I saw and what I didn't do. And I didn't touch anything. I didn't put anything into anyone. If they took something earlier, I didn't see it. I told the police what I'm telling you. It's all I have. He looked at me for a long breath. Then he smiled a different kind of smile, the kind that says, there you are. You scratch your elbow when you lie, he said quietly. I looked down. The thin skin at the bend of my arm was red. Flakes of white had gathered under my nail without me noticing. I don't know what happened, I said, angry at the tremor in my voice. I can only guess. Everyone else can only guess. Please, Dr. Osborne, just sign the paper, put your name on the line, and let me go home and figure out how to live with the part of the story that never stops replaying. The part that burns, he said. There's something else in your head besides the three at the table. I can see it land every time you pause more than 2 seconds. Your face changes twice. Once for the dinner. Once for the other thing. I looked at him. It was like having someone walk into a locked room you didn't tell anyone existed. What else do you see? He asked. What hits you so hard you have to push air out of your chest to keep from making a sound? I don't know what you mean, I said. Yes, he said. You do. The table scene is one thing. There's another. A second image that you carry like an iron in your hands. It is worse. It's the one that scares you into silence. Just hearing him name it brought the heat back. There are days when I can walk to work and back and it only brushes my shoulder once late in the afternoon. A quick hot hand, easy enough to shake off. Then there are days when saying the word dinner is enough to pull the whole reel into my head, 7 seconds at a time, again and again until my jaw aches from clenching. I felt it building. The pier raised itself out of water and slotted into place under my feet. The sailor stood where he always stood, left of center, leaning on the railing. When he turns, his beard moves in the breeze. When he speaks, his mouth doesn't open much. The words come out like he's reminding you of the time. Ships coming to port. My hands went to my head and stayed there. I bent forward and dragged a breath into my chest hard enough to hurt my throat. The room went grainy at the edges, like an old photograph. I pressed my palms against my temples until the pressure became pain, and then I pressed harder. I could hear the chair move. I could hear water set down on wood. I could hear my own breath. It took everything I had to pull back up into the office and sit without sliding onto the floor. He put his hands under my arms and guided me upright and back against the chair. He tilted the glass at my mouth and let a small stream catch my tongue. He didn't say anything while I swallowed and blinked the room into place, corner by corner. Ethan, he said finally, quietly. You told them about it. I stared at him. That's what happened, he said, voice low. You didn't poison anyone. You didn't arrange a coincidence. You carried something in your head from the night before, and in your kitchen you tried to share it. You tried to explain it, and it went through them like a wire. I forced my lungs to slow. Yes, I said. He sat back and rested his elbows on his knees. He didn't look away. If anything, he looked more steady than he had when we started. So let me ask the only question that matters now, he said. What will it take for you to say it out loud to me? I'm not afraid of your words. I'm here to take the weight. It's not words, I said. I mean, I can use words, but the thing itself is not made of words. It's like a splinter that isn't a splinter. It got in while I slept. I can't get it out. It doesn't kill me, but it takes a piece every time it rolls through. I've seen people hold ideas that cut, he said. I've watched minds trap themselves in pictures and loops. I've brought more than a few back to the ground. So when I ask you to tell me, that's not bravado. It's work I know how to do. You haven't seen this, I said. He didn't flinch. I've seen things that would make you think I was trying to impress you, he said. Trust me when I say this, I believe you. I believe that what you saw in your sleep is not something a brain should handle. But I also believe that speech is a way out. Let me try to help. Tell me, what if it hurts you? I asked. If it does, he said. But I don't believe we make progress by guarding each other from the dark. We make progress by turning the light on together and staying put. He put his hand on my knee. I set my hand on top of his and moved it away. I think it's infectious, I said. I think it uses me like a carrier bag. I think it travels by description. I think I got it through a door my sleep left open, and now I can't shut the door behind it because it lives in the house with me. How often? He asked. At least once a day, I said. More if someone says one of 3 or 4 words. More if I try not to think about it. More if I lie awake sometime after 2 in the morning and stare at the long crack in the ceiling over my bed. It never kills me. It just burns. And it keeps coming. He wrote something on the pad without looking down. Then he put the pad face down and leaned in again. I believe you, he said. I believe this is more than anxiety or a simple recurring nightmare. I also believe that part of its power is the silence it forces on you. So I am asking you very clearly to tell me what you see. Even if you think it will hurt me. Start at the edges. Use simple words. I am here. I will not leave the room. For a long moment, the only sound was the low hum from the vent and the faint thud of footsteps in the hallway outside. I closed my eyes so I wouldn't have to watch his face while I said it. "It's 7 seconds," I said. "Every time. Not 6 and not 8. 7. It starts at the end of a wooden pier. The boards are old but not splintered. The handrail on the left is smooth under your palm. The sky is the sort of blue that makes you think of old postcards. The water is darker, almost slate, with a light wind wrinkling the surface. It's warm on your shoulders and cool on your cheeks. It feels good to be there. It feels real." He didn't move. He was so still I wondered if he was even breathing. His stillness made it easier to keep going. "To your left is a sailor," I said. "Not dressed like a Halloween costume, but with a sun-faded shirt and a beard that is more gray than white and hair that the wind has already decided what to do with. He leans on the rail with his elbows and looks out. Then he turns his head toward you like he knows you're there, even if he wasn't looking a second ago, and he says the same thing every time in a voice that sounds like rope feels. 'Ship's coming to port.'" I swallowed. "Past him," I said. "Far out, right where the line between water and sky looks like something painted by a careful child, a dark spot appears. At first it looks like a smudge on your glasses, but you aren't wearing glasses. Then you see that it has shape. Not a ship's shape. Not any shape that fits anything you've seen. A round center with long arms. Not arms like a person's arms. Not arms like anything soft-boned. Reaching up." My hands curled against my thighs. "You can't not look at it," I said. "That's the worst part. You try to turn around. You try to look at the boards under your feet or the knot in the post at your right or the faces of the gulls. Your eyes keep going back. In the last 2 seconds it gets closer fast, but not the way things on water approach. It doesn't ride the surface. It eats the picture. The color goes out at the edges like someone poured ink into the corners of a photograph and tilted it toward the center. The heat came in a clean wave. I let it hit and pass instead of fighting it, because fighting makes it last longer. I breathed out through my teeth. "And then it starts again," I said softly. 7 seconds. Pier. Sailor. Words. Black shape. Closer. Restart. Over and over until you force it out like you're pushing a heavy door shut against the wind. If you stop at the wrong second, it slips a hand back inside and you have to slam the door again. It hurts. It always hurts. That's the whole of it." He was quiet. I opened my eyes because the calm in his silence felt different than the calm of someone who has zoned out. He was still there, still forward on his chair, hands loose on his knees, eyes on my face. He looked, moved. Not shocked, he'd trained that out of himself years ago, I could tell, but moved, like someone who had just watched a small bird hit a window and was deciding whether to go outside. "They died because I tried to describe it," I said. "I said those words in my kitchen. I thought if I told them what I had dreamed, it would shrink. I thought it would be funny in a creepy way, the way the brain sometimes is." They laughed at the part about the sailor's line. Holly rolled her eyes. Janet said, "Oh, like a ghost story." Alex asked if I'd eaten too late. I laughed too. I described the black spot. I said long arms. Their eyes went up like someone cut the strings that held them. They fell. The rest you know. He didn't write anything. He didn't have to. He had every word. "If you're starting to picture it now," I said, "you should stop. I'm not being dramatic. I'm trying to help you. Push it away. Do not stand on that pier." The room tugged at the edges again, the way it does when the 7 seconds loop offers itself one more time just to see if you'll take it. I pinched my thumbnail into my palm until a half-moon mark formed. I looked at the corner where the ceiling met the wall, at the thin line of paint that wasn't quite straight. I focused on the imperfection until my eyes watered. I breathed. It faded. When my sight was crisp again, the office was different. Not in shape, but in light. The daylight outside had slid away and a tender street lamp glow had taken its place. I checked my watch. It was 8:30. Between my first word and this minute, 4 hours had fallen into a well I couldn't see the bottom of. "Dr. Osborne?" I said. He didn't answer. He was on his side on the carpet, not where he had been sitting, but where a person would be if he stood up too fast and then forgot how to stand. His eyes were open, but looking at nothing you could point to. In the dim evening, they looked like the underside of a storm. There was no sound in him. No movement. I sat there with my hands on the arms of the chair and counted breaths that didn't do anything, because all the useful breaths had been used hours ago, apparently. I knew I should get up and call for help. I knew time is a thing that matters when a body chooses to stop behaving. I didn't move right away. I sat and listened to the vent's low ocean and told myself to focus on the dull details, scuffs in the paint near the baseboard, water rings on the wood where the glass had sat, a small scratch in the leather of his chair's arm. When the world stops making sense, you collect facts you can hold in your hand. That's all I had left. Eventually, I stood. I stepped around him the way you step around someone sleeping because your brain can't make your body believe nothing might wake up. I opened the office door. The hallway was empty and smelled like paper and winter. I walked to the front where the reception desk sat with its little bell and stack of pens and sign-in sheet with my name printed in my worst block letters. No one was there to ring the bell for. I pressed the button on the phone that said, "Outside line," and then 9, and then 1, and then 1. While the phone rang, I watched the window. In the parking lot, a few cars sat under the streetlight like animals sleeping in a field. A light mist had started. We all know the sound rain makes when it is real rain, and this wasn't that yet, it was just a fine ticking on the glass. My reflection looked like a stranger's reflection, pale from office bulbs and tired in a way you don't notice until you're standing alone with a window and a phone. The voice on the other end of the line asked me what the emergency was. My mouth moved and my words came out in a shape that told the truth without opening any doors. A man in an office. I think he's not breathing. The address is on the website. Please hurry. The voice told me to stay on the line, and I did, and then the sound of footsteps started in the hallway behind me, not a rush, but that steady, purposeful walk that uniforms know how to do even when there is nothing to be done quickly. I stood still and stared at my own face in the glass and thought about how I had meant to go home after this appointment, and make rice and fry an egg and read a book I had been pretending to read for 2 weeks. I thought about how many times I had hoped that telling the story would be enough to drain it. I thought about silence and speech and the line between. I have replayed the minute before I opened my mouth for him. I have replayed the minute his eyes left the room. I have replayed the 48 hours that followed the dinner in my kitchen so many times I have worn grooves in the floor of my mind. There are no new turns to take there. There is only the simple math of cause and effect I didn't want to believe could be true. I carried something I didn't ask to carry. I tried to put it down in front of people I loved. It killed them. I tried to hand it to a man who wanted to help. It killed him too. I don't have advice to give. I don't have a lesson I can tuck in as a last line to make this worth anything. I have a room, a window, a soft sound of water against glass, and a hope that what you read here didn't build itself into a picture you can't pull down. For your sake, I hope you didn't see it too clearly. I live in a place where Halloween barely happens. People here don't dress up much, there aren't many decorations, and if a house puts a pumpkin on the porch, it becomes the talk of the street. I've always loved the idea of it though, the costumes, the candy, the music, the excuse to be weird without anyone staring. I'm 19, stuck in a small town that still thinks and acts like we're all 14, and most nights I lie on my bed, stare at my ceiling fan, and wonder when anything exciting is finally going to happen to me. So when I stumbled across a website for a Halloween party in a bigger town 2 hours away, I felt something wake up inside me. The site looked like someone actually cared. Orange and black colors, little moving bats, cute fonts, directions, a time, a simple "all are welcome" message. I clicked every page twice just to make sure it was real. It felt real. For once, I wasn't going to sit at home scrolling through photos of other people's lives. For once, I was going to have a story of my own. I put real effort into getting ready. I went to a thrift store, bought a black dress with a swishy skirt and a denim jacket with a rip in the sleeve, and I sewed little lace cuffs onto the jacket myself. I ordered face paint and watched video after video until I was sure I could do a sugar skull look on my own. I even did a practice run the day before. It turned out better than anything I'd ever done with makeup. Of course, that meant the actual day wouldn't go as smoothly, because that's how life works, but I tried to keep my expectations in a safe place. On Halloween night I sat at my mirror and painted my face white, added black around my eyes, drew small flowers and dots and lines, and tried to keep my hands steady. It wasn't perfect, but it was me, and I liked how brave I looked. I put on my dress and boots, took a few photos for Instagram, and borrowed my mom's car, because my own car exists only in daydreams. The air outside was hot and sticky. We have spring during Halloween, which always feels wrong to me, so I cranked the air conditioning low enough to turn my fingertips numb and set off. I drove with my music loud, singing until my throat felt scratchy. It made the 2 hours feel like less. The highway slid under me, and the sky went from pink to dark blue to ink. I kept thinking, this is the first time I've gone to a real Halloween party. This is the first time I'm going somewhere by myself to meet new people. I kept thinking about how badly I wanted it to be good. The address was easy to find. The building was a small bookstore with a wooden front and a tiny balcony above it, overflowing with flowers. Warm light framed the doorway. The street was narrow and cute, lined with other little shops. Most of them were closed, and the block was quiet except for distant music. I found a parking spot right away. The door was half open, and even from the sidewalk I could hear soft music and a low buzz of voices. For the first time all day, nerves hit me in a wave. I took a breath, touched my painted cheek like I could press courage in from the outside, and stepped in. "Hi! I'm Evelyn. This is my husband, Paolo. Please come inside." The voice came bright from beside the door. Evelyn wore a calavera mask, painted more beautifully than my face, with delicate flowers around the eyes and small, careful teeth. She looked about mid-20s, and her body language was relaxed, confident, like she really wanted me there. Paolo stood next to her, tall and neatly dressed, with a mask shaped like Osiris, the Egyptian god, in dark greens and golds. He had the kind of deep voice that makes you pay attention without trying. He looked like the host of a good party in a movie, not pushy, just glad you showed up. The decorations were perfect without trying too hard. 2 bowls sat just inside the door, toppled with candy I actually recognized from childhood. Electric candles flickered on shelves and window ledges, but they looked real. Pumpkins with careful faces glowed on the counter. Orange balloons and paper bats filled blank spaces without making it look crowded. A big table wore a white cloth with black ovals like a friendly ghost face. I counted roughly a dozen people, which seemed small for a party with a whole website, but the bookstore wasn't big, and the number felt cozy, not disappointing. There were only 3 bookshelves, which I thought was strange for a bookstore, but I figured the rest of the room had been cleared so people could dance. "Make yourself at home," Paolo said. "We're so happy you came." It was easy to do what he asked. The music had that perfect middle volume where you can talk without yelling and still feel like you're at a party. Some people stood at small tables and ate little snacks. A few were dancing near the back, where someone had moved the chairs aside to make space. The food was the kind that makes you feel taken care of: little pastries, meatballs on toothpicks, cut fruit, chips, dips. Everywhere I turned, someone smiled or said hello, and for a person like me, who's spent years being the odd one out, that kind of welcome does things to your heart. Everyone wore masks except me, and that didn't feel awkward. It felt like I'd been let in on their thing. My painted face fit in anyway. I ate, I talked about books with 2 people who actually listened when I spoke. I danced until sweat made the edges of my makeup feel damp, and I even flirted. His mask was plain white with a detailed Ouroboros circling the edge, a snake swallowing its tail. He told me his name was Daniel, and his voice was gentle in a way that felt rare. "Was this supposed to be a masquerade?" I asked, because I was the only one without a mask, and it seemed polite to check if I'd missed a line in the invitation. He laughed softly. "No, we just like masks. You look great without one." "Thank you," I said, feeling the kind of warmth that comes from being seen. "Hey, why are there only 3 bookshelves?" For just a second his eyes dropped. If I hadn't been watching closely, I would have missed it. Then his voice went smooth again. "It's just a small selection for tonight. The rest are upstairs. Evelyn and Paolo live up there." "Oh, they own the store?" "Evelyn inherited it from her mother," he said. "That's sweet," I said. "So you're all friends?" "Since we were kids," he said. That made sense. The way everyone moved around each other felt practiced, like they'd known one another a long time. I moved toward the shelves and ran my fingers over spines. The books looked almost new, most of them from 2013 and 2014, with lots of Stephen King and Agatha Christie. An old edition of Peril at End House caught my eye. It had that thick, slightly rough paper I love. I turned to Evelyn. "Could I buy this?" I asked. Her reaction was small but real. Surprise, then something like confusion, then a quick, warm smile. "I'm so sorry," she said. "Not tonight. They're from my personal collection." "Oh," I said, feeling silly. "Of course." The feeling passed almost at once. I went back to talking and dancing and tasting things and asking questions. Every time I asked someone if we could trade numbers or follow each other online, I got a gentle evasion instead of a yes. "I'm not on social media." Or, "Why don't you give me your email?" But nobody was rude about it, and I was too happy to let it spoil anything. For once, I wasn't outside looking in. I was inside, and I fit. At 3 in the morning, Evelyn told us the party was over. It felt strange that everyone stopped so neatly instead of drifting out in little groups, but I guessed they had jobs in the morning. I offered to help move the shelves back. "The shelves?" She glanced at Daniel, and then back at me. No, I'll do it tomorrow." "Thank you, Adriana. You're a good friend." I basked in that sentence longer than I should admit. I said goodnight, hugged Daniel, waved at Paolo and Evelyn, and drove home with the windows cracked to let the damp spring air in. I was too wired to sleep. I replayed conversations in my head and tried to memorize the way Daniel laughed. I always check my phone first thing when I wake up. That morning, I did it even before I sat up. I wanted to look at the photos and videos from the party, because sometimes the next morning is when you realize you dreamed everything. In the tiny thumbnails, the pictures looked like they had looked when I took them, me standing with people in masks, the ghost tablecloth, a blurry shot of people dancing, Daniel holding a cup. But when I tapped one to open it, the photo changed. Instead of me with anyone, it was just me, standing alone in a dark space. It wasn't a photo I had taken. I tried another. Same thing. Tiny thumbnail normal, full size wrong. I took a screenshot of the gallery so I could capture the thumbnails, but when I looked at the screenshot, those tiny pictures had changed too. I reset my phone. After that, even the thumbnails were wrong. I tried to get back to the party's website through my browser history, but it wasn't there. The link was gone. I couldn't remember the bookstore's name. I didn't think I'd seen a sign. But I remembered the street and the way the facade looked, and I remembered the town, so I searched for bookstores in that town and scrolled and scrolled. A headline with the street name stopped me cold. "Terrible fire destroys Atina bookstore. 9 people die and 3 are injured." The story was from March 2014. My stomach dropped. I searched Atina bookstore and the town's name. An article from November 2014. Shopkeeper on street name claims to see movement inside burnt down Atina bookstore. Police suspect group of teenage ruffians. One from April 2016. Stores start to leave, street name. Shopkeeper says it's not safe anymore and police haven't made any arrests. I wanted to get in the car right then and check for myself, but my mom needed the car and the last bus had already left. I didn't have anyone to call for a ride. I sat on my bed with my phone in my lap and stared at the wall. When I finally lay down, I could still smell the ghost of pumpkin and sugar in my hair. I don't remember closing my eyes. In the morning I drove back. The closer I got, the quieter I became. The pretty little street I had walked down felt empty now. Most of the shops were closed or gone. Trash drifted and collected along the curb. A loose piece of paper scuttled across the road like a crab. The balcony I remembered, full of flowers and the soft glow of light, was black and dead. The front was a charred opening. The bookstore was a shell. I stepped in through a torn, half-hinged door. Ash dusted everything in a soft gray. There was nothing left but rubble and metal bones. 3 ruined bookshelves leaned like tired men. I stood there until my throat hurt, then went to the car and cried. I don't know what I would have done if that had been the end. But almost a year later, near Halloween, an email arrived. It was from Evelyn and Paolo, inviting me to the party again. The address was the same. The time was the same. The message felt like a hand reaching out of the dark. I tried to reply, but my email bounced back with a delivery failure notice, like I had written to a place that didn't exist. I stared at the screen and then at my reflection in the black glass and told myself this was ridiculous. Then I got in the car and drove. When I walked in, Daniel moved to meet me like he had been waiting at the door. Adriana, he said, smiling even though I couldn't see his face under the mask. You came. Of course I came, I said. Of course. Admitting that I had read the articles and stood in the ash felt like stepping onto ice, but I did it anyway. I know what happened. Paolo's voice softened. We thought you might. I still want to be here, I said. Even if it's only one night a year. We're glad, Daniel said. He turned toward Evelyn. We found the right person, he told her, and I felt heat rise into my face for reasons I couldn't name. Why me? I asked. You didn't know me. I was a kid when it happened. Daniel looked at me for a long second. We've always been an odd bunch, he said. The kid with the hand-me-downs. The nerd with the thick glasses. The girl with the perfect sister. Every year, on the one night we can cross over, we reach someone. We don't know how the invitation finds them. But a person comes, and we host them, and for a few hours they feel what it's like to belong. Most never come back once they understand what we are. I will, I said. I promise. Evelyn stepped closer. Even with the mask on, her nervousness came through in the way she clasped and unclasped her fingers. I have a favor to ask, she said. I have something I need to make right, and I can't do it myself. Will you help me? If I do, I asked carefully, will you disappear? I don't want that. No, Paolo said, his tone almost fatherly. We won't vanish. We can't move on just because a thread gets tied. We live where we live now, and we can visit here once a year. This is only about easing a heart. If you need me, I said, I'll help. Evelyn told me her story. When she and her sister were kids, her sister Layla was the favorite kind you see in movies, pretty and polite, good at school, every adult's dream. People called her perfect to her face. Evelyn was the opposite, loud, awkward, never quite fitting into the shape people wanted for her. Their mother had owned this bookstore. When she died, she left the shop to Evelyn. Layla married a man with money, and from the outside her life looked neat and shiny. But not everything that shines is warm. Evelyn and Paolo tried to keep the store open, but neither of them knew much about running a business. The debts built faster than the shelves did. They were going to lose the place. Their mothers will had a line you could read 2 ways, and Evelyn read it the way that gave her all the inheritance money. She told herself Layla didn't need it. She told herself it was for the store, for the thing their mother had poured her life into. She told herself lots of things that sounded reasonable when you're desperate and scared and tired of always being the one who loses. She took the money and put it into keeping the shop alive. Layla didn't care about the money. Not really. But she cared about being passed over. She cared about their mother's keepsakes, the little things that attach memories to your hands. She had wanted their mother's locket, and Evelyn had taken the mementos along with everything else. Layla felt empty. She set a small fire, she said, to ruin the store so Evelyn would finally feel a loss too. She didn't mean to hurt anyone. She didn't know the wiring was a mess and the walls would catch like dry leaves. She didn't expect flames to climb and swallow a life. She didn't expect that other people would be inside, customers, employees, friends. She didn't mean to kill anybody. Intent doesn't matter much to fire. I want to forgive her, Evelyn said. I need her to hear it. I want her to know it wasn't only her fault, and that I still love her. Tell me where to find her, I said. They gave me an address. The house sat in a rich neighborhood with trimmed grass and modern angles. When I rang the bell, a tired woman in a crisp uniform answered. How can I help you? She asked. I'm looking for Layla, I said. We used to know each other. I thought I'd stop by since I'm in town. You're not from here, are you? She said, almost kindly. Layla moved. She wrote an address on a scrap of paper and handed it to me. She doesn't live here anymore. The second address took me to a building with peeling paint and a stairwell that smelled like old soup and bleach. I climbed 6 flights. My clothes stuck to my back in the heat. A woman opened the door after my second knock. She was younger than she looked at first glance, early 30s, but the last few years had worn her like a coat. Her hair was oily and pulled into a bun that had given up trying. Her eyes had deep circles and a flatness I recognized from mirrors on bad days. I don't remember what exactly I said. I told the truth without the details. That I had somewhere she needed to be, that someone wanted to see her, that tonight might give her something she had been starving for. Maybe it was the way I said it. Maybe it was the calendar and the date on it. Maybe some doors opened because they'd been waiting to. She walked down the stairs beside me and sat in the passenger seat without one question I couldn't answer. When we stepped through the burned doorway, Evelyn was there, as if she had been waiting since I left. Layla made a sound I've never heard before, like grief coming up from a place below language. Evelyn opened her arms and said, I forgive you. And Layla fell into her and said, I'm sorry, in 1,000 different ways. She went to each masked person and dropped to her knees and apologized again and again, to the employees, to the customers, to the people who had suffered because of something she started and couldn't stop. The whole room felt like a breath being let out after being held too long. I was jealous, Layla said. I always thought Mom loved you more. I wanted the locket and the photos and the little things. I wanted proof that I mattered. When I didn't get them, I lost myself. It doesn't excuse anything. I just need you to know. I shouldn't have taken what wasn't mine, Evelyn said. I hurt you by pretending I hadn't. I was scared and selfish. I'm sorry. Paolo told us quietly that the fire had been waiting to happen. The wiring was bad. The walls were dry. The right spark would have started it sooner or later. Layla's small flame turned into a hunger that ran up beams and across ceilings faster than any one person could have imagined. Along with Evelyn and Paolo, 3 employees died, 5 customers, and 2 other people who had the bad luck to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. Their names are carved into the bones of that room, and you could feel it. The grief never left, but it changed shape. By the end of the night, Layla's face was softer. She looked younger, more like a person and less like a shadow. She said she would try to call her husband. She said she would try to find a therapist. She said she would try to live in a way that honored the people who couldn't. Daniel took my hand and led me to the patch of floor where we could move without knocking into anyone. We danced slowly, and it felt unreal how real it felt. His hand was warm on my back. His breath touched my neck. He slid his mask up and I saw his face. It wasn't the face he was born with. Burns had left his skin uneven and shiny in places, scarred in others. But all I saw were his eyes, green, clear, kind. He looked more alive than anyone I'd met in years. He kissed me. It wasn't a movie kiss. It was gentle and honest. It felt like a start. "Have you ever kissed a ghost?" he whispered. "I barely kissed anyone," I said, and it came out with a laugh that surprised me. Honesty felt easier with him. He took a breath like he was bracing himself. "I should tell you something," he said. "Technically, I'm not dead." The floor shifted under me. "What do you mean?" "I wasn't inside the store when the fire started," he said. "I lived nearby. I saw the smoke. I called for help and then I went in to get Evelyn. I would have given my life for her. I almost did. I wasn't hurt the way the others were, not at first. They took me to the hospital. I've been in a bed since then. The doctors call it a vegetative state. My brain waves say no one's home, but I'm here. I'm in between. I've been spending Halloween here with my friends, because that's the only night I can slip past the edge and come back where things matter. My mother sits by my bed and talks to me. She prays. She tells me what the doctors say. They want to shut the machines off. She asks me for a sign if I'm still in there. I want to give her one. I want to live in your world again. I didn't know I wanted that until I met you." He paused to let me take it in. My hands had found his face without me noticing. "Can you help me?" he asked. "I can't do it from inside. My body remembers how to breathe and to beat and nothing else. Will you come to the hospital and hold my hand and remind me there's something to come back to? If it doesn't work, I'll understand. If you don't want to see me like that, I'll understand. You're not gruesome," I said. "You're Daniel." I kissed him again because words were too small for the moment. The next day I went to the hospital. His mother had the same green eyes, but hers were tired and full of years that wouldn't end. "Who are you?" she asked, polite but wary, like a person who's had too many strangers promise too many things. "I hope I'm the sign you've been praying for," I said. She didn't ask anything else. She stepped aside. I sat in the chair, took Daniel's hand, the one not taped to any tube, and started talking. "Hi," I said. "It's me. It's time to come back. I know being alive hurts. I know the world wasn't kind to you and took too much and left you with scars you didn't choose. But I've been waiting for someone like you without knowing I was waiting. Your mom loves you. I love you. I've thought about you every day since last Halloween, and I didn't even know what your face looked like then. Now I do, and I still think about you. Please wake up. Please come back to the world we both want you in." We moved to Denver 2 years ago, and from the first week I felt like I'd landed in a place that wanted to surprise me. I had lived in Orlando for 15 years. Orlando is bright and flat and humid, and for a long time I thought that was all I needed. Denver is another planet. The mountains show up in the windows like a painting no one took down. The air tastes clean and cold. People here plan their weekends around trails and slopes and long walks with dogs that look like small bears. They talk about snow like a friend. They hang flags for teams I had never followed. They take pride in making the city a little strange. On our first drive-in from the airport, our driver pointed at the giant blue horse outside the terminal with its glowing red eyes and said, "We call him Lucifer. The head fell off and killed the artist while he was building it." Then he smiled, like that was a perfectly normal welcome to a new life. I work for an art school. In Orlando I ran a small remote office, handling a little of everything from my desk. When the school asked me to move to the main campus near downtown Denver, I said yes. Uprooting our family sounded scary, but it also sounded like a chance. My wife said she could live with cold if cold came with mountain views. Our son was 6. He thought snow was something that only happened in movies. Our daughter was 2 and happy wherever the snacks were. We knew Denver would cost more. I just didn't understand how much more until we signed a lease and bought groceries. Rent made me blink. Even a simple dinner out felt like a treat we had to plan. The city was worth it, but the math was tight. I studied film in college, which hadn't mattered much for a while, but the camera gear in my closet started to look like a second job. I opened a wedding videography business. Couples fly here to get married with mountains behind them. They want simple, honest footage they can show their grandparents, and clips they can share online. I had the gear and the eye. It helped. It gave me a reason to drive into corners of Colorado I wouldn't have seen otherwise. It gave me a way to keep up. Most couples book months ahead. They send me long emails with dates and questions, links to Pinterest boards, lists of songs. A few weeks before Halloween, I got a message that did not fit anything I was used to. No names. No phone number. No sweet story about how they met. Just one line. $10,000 paid in full on Halloween night. We require your services. 9 p.m., Terminal C. I showed it to my wife. She tilted her head and read it twice. It's probably a prank, she said. Probably, I said, and felt the part of me that keeps our bank account steady do the quick math anyway. $10,000 is a lot of rent. $10,000 is braces and snow tires and a new winter jacket that isn't from a second-hand store. $10,000 turns a tight month into a comfortable one. They didn't even sign it, she said. And Terminal C? That's airport security. How are you getting to a gate without a ticket? I'll figure it out, I said, and tried to sound like I believed myself. Worst case, I drive out to the airport for nothing, walk around, and come home. It's Halloween, she said. You promised trick-or-treating. I'll be there, I said. I'll leave after. On Halloween we walked the neighborhood at dusk, our son in a superhero cape and our daughter in a costume with ears that made her laugh every time they flopped. The air was warm and damp because fall where we come from is not the place where leaves crack under your feet. It was more like late spring. The porch lights glowed one by one. I watched my kids ring bells and say, "Thank you," in those small proud voices children use when they get something right. I ate a stolen peppermint patty while my wife watched me with a mock glare. My favorite, she said, and took it back out of my hand. By the time we went home, the candy buckets were full enough to make the straps cut into their wrists. I changed in the bedroom while the kids dumped their loot onto the living room floor. I wore a black suit because a black suit works almost anywhere, and I didn't know what I was walking into. I strapped a GoPro to my chest. I've started wearing it at weddings to catch everything between the official shots. It saves to the cloud on its own. Even if I drop it or get it wet, I don't lose anything. I told myself that was just being professional, but some part of me liked the idea that there would be a record of whatever happened tonight. The drive to the airport felt shorter than usual. I parked in short-term parking and pulled my camera case behind me like any traveler with too much stuff. Inside, Denver International is bright and open, and at night it feels even bigger, like the ceiling might lift and let the stars in. Travelers moved in every direction with that airport focus that turns each person into their own little world. I kept looking at the signs for Terminal C and the TSA lines, and the problem hit me like it should have hit me earlier. I don't have a ticket. I can't get through security. No pass, no gate, no terminal. I walked to the customer service counter. An older woman stood behind it. Her hair was pale and neat, and the tight skin around her eyes looked like it might melt if she stood too close to a heat lamp. She looked at me without expression. "Hi," I said. "This is going to sound strange. I'm a videographer. Someone hired me to film something at Terminal C. I don't have a ticket. Is there a way to, I don't know, get a pass? A guest pass?" She didn't answer. She walked around the counter and started toward baggage claim. After a second I followed. We stopped under a small statue I had walked past a dozen times and never really seen. It was a gargoyle climbing out of a suitcase. The woman looked up at it and said, "Wait here." And then she left me alone under the gargoyle's stone smile. I turned on my GoPro. The little red light blinked once. A man in a blue suit walked toward me from the far side of the hall. He was middle-aged and handsome in the careful way some men are, like they had figured out their face and their hair and what cut of jacket worked for them and decided to never change anything again. His suit fit like someone had measured every inch twice. Even his cufflinks looked expensive, small triangles that caught the light. He held out his hand. I shook it. "Come with me," he said, and started walking. He didn't look back to see if I would follow. His shoes clicked on the floor in a rhythm that sounded like a metronome set too fast. We stepped into an elevator near the end of the concourse. He pressed a button I couldn't see. The elevator hummed as it moved down. He watched the numbers change without speaking. The doors opened into a corridor I didn't know existed. The floor was smooth and dark. The walls were some shade of stone that made the ceiling look low. Our footsteps echoed in a way that made the hallway feel longer. We walked until we reached a large wooden door. From the other side came the faint sound of music and a blend of men's voices talking low. The man in the blue suit turned to me and smiled. "You can set up here," he said. "Take your time." "Do you have an itinerary?" I asked, trying to switch on my professional voice. "Names of the couple? Any restrictions on where I can stand?" He smiled in a way that made me feel like I had told a joke I didn't understand. "Do you understand?" he asked. "That you will begin when you are ready?" I nodded. I wasn't sure if I understood anything, but my hands knew what to do, and sometimes that's enough. I opened my case. Before I could pull out a camera, he handed me a mask. It was white with a small beak and soft fake feathers arranged around the eyes, like the gargoyle's long-nosed face turned pretty. "Wear this before you enter," he said, and walked away. His steps faded until the sound was part of the hall. I adjusted my Steadicam mount. I lifted the mask and tied it behind my head. The ribbon was cool on my fingers. I picked up my camera. I listened for the music on the other side of the door and let my breath settle. The next thing I remember is morning. Light was painful when I opened my eyes, and when I blinked I saw bright spots move across the ceiling. My daughter climbed onto my stomach and landed a small fist on my chest. "Wake up, Daddy!" she yelled, proud of how loud her voice could get. I sat up. My wife leaned on the doorframe with a mug of coffee. "Good morning," she said. "Planning on sleeping all day? What time is it?" "After 10, she said. "Don't worry. The school closed. We got a ton of snow overnight." I swung my legs out of bed. My phone said Tuesday, 10:22 a.m. I should have been at work. It took me a second to remember that the main campus does close when the roads turn into white walls. My wife must have read the panic on my face. "Relax," she said. "I wouldn't let you sleep if you had to go anywhere." In the shower the water felt like needles at first. My head throbbed in a slow, mean way. I tried to pull up the night in my mind, the way I rewind wedding footage to find the exchange of rings or the quiet moment after the vows, but there was nothing to rewind to. I remembered the blue suit. I remembered the echo of shoes. I remembered the mask in my hand. Then a blank wall. Then morning. I dried off and went back to the bedroom and grabbed my camera. I turned it on. The memory card was empty. I slid it out and tried the backup card I always keep in my bag. Empty. I tried not to swear in a way my kids would hear. In the living room, my wife handed me coffee. "Before you panic," she said, "I checked our bank account. There's a deposit for $10,000. I stared at her. "Already?" "This morning," she said. "So whatever you did last night worked?" She asked the questions any normal person would ask. Did it go well? Was the couple nice? Was the footage good? I told her yes, yes, and yes. The words felt like pebbles in my mouth. They didn't sound like lies when I said them, which almost made them worse. "Can we go sledding?" my son asked, already wearing one boot and waving the other. "In a minute," I said. I strapped our kids into their jackets and found their mittens under the couch where they always end up. I rubbed a little oil on the sled runners so they wouldn't drag. Then I grabbed the GoPro. We use it when we hike or sled. The videos are grainy but fun. The camera was still clipped into the chest mount. I remembered the little red light and the gargoyle statue, and how I had told myself the cloud would catch everything. I opened my laptop and logged in. A file sat at the top of the list. It was long, One continuous clip that began when I pressed record under the gargoyle's wings. I clicked play. The video started with travelers moving across the frame. People in coats. People with roller bags. People staring at their phones. I scrubbed forward. The hall returned. I walked behind the man in the blue suit. Our shoes clicked and echoed. I scrubbed forward again. The door opened into a room lit by candles. It took the GoPro a second to adjust, so for a heartbeat all I could see was moving darkness. Then shapes came into focus. People. Dozens of them. All in masks. Some dressed like I was, in black suits or dark dresses. Some wore cloaks with deep hoods that hid their hair and shoulders. No one looked at me for more than a second. A person with a camera can move anywhere if they act like they belong there. I moved closer to the center of the room. A stone slab sat on a platform. It wasn't smooth. Its surface looked rough, like it had been dragged in rather than built here. On it lay a woman. She was nude. A white mask covered her face. Her arms and legs were tied to the corners with a thick red ribbon, not rope, like someone had dressed a gift. The ribbon crossed her wrists and ankles and disappeared under the slab. She didn't fight. She didn't speak. The room was quiet in a way that felt heavy, like sound itself was waiting to see what would happen. Around the slab stood a ring of people in long cloaks. Their masks hid any hint of who they were. Looking at them, you couldn't tell one from another. They began to hum. It started low and grew. The pitch rose until it turned into one sound that was not quite a note, and not quite a word. The woman's fingers curled. Her chest lifted and fell faster. The hum got louder. My hand shook just enough to make the candle flames dance on the edge of the frame. The circle shifted to make a gap, and a figure walked in. This person wore a cloak too, but their mask was plain white, as smooth as a plate. No eyes, no mouth, no nose, just blank. The humming stopped all at once, like someone cut a wire. The silence that filled the room was bigger than the room. It pushed at my ears. The person in the white mask took off his cloak. In the flicker of the candles he looked like a statue pulled off a pedestal. Broad shoulders, pale skin, no modesty. Someone to his left held out a knife. The knife looked old. Its handle was leather that had been wrapped many times and darkened by hands. The blade was not straight. It had a jagged edge that caught the light in sharp little points. A dagger. He lifted it and drew the blade slowly across the woman's abdomen. He didn't press hard enough to draw blood. Her muscles jumped under the steel. He leaned down. He said something I couldn't hear. Then he stood and looked around the room as if he wanted to see every face. When he spoke his voice was flat and calm, not the chanting sort of tone I half expected. "On this day, let us celebrate," he said. He raised the dagger above his head. Both hands gripped the handle. The point aimed down. "Daddy!" my daughter shouted, and the bedroom door burst open. Two small bodies jumped onto the bed. I closed the laptop by reflex, then immediately hated myself for it. What did I think my kids would see? I reminded myself I had shut it for them, not for me. "Let's go!" my son yelled. "Sledding!" "I'll be right there," I said, and my voice sounded too thin. I put on my snow jacket. My fingers fumbled with the zipper. I wiped my face on my sleeve, though I didn't think there was any sweat there, only the memory of candle heat. When I walked back out, I scooped my son and tossed him over my shoulder like a sack. He squealed the way he always does when he feels like he's flying. I tried to let that sound push everything else to the bottom of my head. "Hold on," my wife said. "A man called for you. He says he was at the ceremony last night and wants to talk about future services." I looked at her for a second longer than I should have. "Tell him I'll call him back," I said. Outside, the world had turned into a white field. The street was quiet. The sky was the same color as the snow, so the roofs and trees looked like they were floating. Our boots sank and squeaked. While our son barreled down the first hill and our daughter watched from halfway up and clapped every time he reached the bottom, my mind kept trying to climb back into the room. I didn't want it to. I wanted to think about wax sled runners and whether the chest mount would make decent footage of a 6-year-old's crash. I wanted to let the cold clean out my head. I wanted to pretend the call was about a normal wedding in a normal chapel and that the email had been a strange joke. That night, after the kids fell asleep in a heap of feet and blankets, I opened the laptop again. I watched the rest, because not watching didn't mean the images wouldn't find me. I scrubbed the timeline back to the white mask and the raised blade. I pressed play. In the instant before the scene moved, I remembered the way the hum had made my bones feel hollow, and my hand hovered over the keyboard like I could cover the moment up. Then the clip continued. The blade paused, high, as if the person holding it was listening for something. The woman's chest rose and fell slow, like she was sleeping. A draft blew across the candles, and they bent. Wax ran in small white rivers. The sound in the room changed without anyone speaking. It went from silence to something like the hiss of a crowd breathing in. The knife did not come down. The person in the white mask lowered it. He set the dagger on the edge of the slab with a care that looked almost tender. He put the cloak back on. A hand appeared from the side, and a ribbon was cut. Another cut followed. The woman sat up with the mask still on and let her legs fall over the side of the table. The circle moved to let her through. She walked away without help. I stopped the video. I stared at the frozen image. Relief did not arrive. The blade had not fallen, but the whole thing still felt like a trap I had agreed to walk into. $10,000 sat in our account like a stone in a bowl, heavy and real. The camera cards were empty. The cloud had exactly what I had just watched. I thought about the man in the blue suit, his cuff link flashing when he shook my hand, the way he spoke in complete sentences that sounded like instructions. I thought about the customer service woman looking at the gargoyle and telling me to wait. I thought about the smooth mask and the way it hid a whole person behind nothing, and I felt the old familiar itch of curiosity, and the equal and opposite pull of wanting to stay exactly where I was. The week after Halloween, little things started to happen that made the GoPro clip feel less like a single page and more like the start of a book. I found a square envelope under our front door mat with my name on it in neat black script. Inside was a card with a triangle embossed in the corner, and 2 words, "Thank you." No signature. We got a package with no return address that contained nothing but a very nice lens cloth and a business card with a phone number I didn't recognize. When I called it from a burner app, a recorded voice said, "We appreciate your discretion." And the line went dead. I had always assumed the world of secrets was a movie thing. It turns out if you say yes at the right time, parts of your life that used to be normal get edited differently. I did not tell my wife any of that. I hated that I didn't. But what would I say? That I had no footage from a night someone had paid me well for? That the only record lived on a camera I hadn't been hired to wear? That the person on the phone asked for future services like we were talking about dry cleaning? She already thought the job was odd. I had reassured her because it was easier. I told myself I was protecting her from worry. I told myself I was waiting to understand it. The truth was I didn't want to break our kitchen table open and spill weirdness onto it. Work was quiet. Snow slows everything down. I graded what I needed to grade and moved meetings online and told myself I was lucky to have a life where an unexpected storm was an excuse to make pancakes. At night, when the kids were asleep and the house hummed the way a house hums in winter, I opened my email drafts and wrote replies I never sent. I wrote questions to the address that had sent me the first message. I wrote things like, "Will there be another event? And do you always work at the airport? And was it a wedding?" I deleted all of them. I made coffee in the morning and pretended nothing was sitting in my drafts. One afternoon, my phone rang while I was watching a test render from last month's mountain wedding. The number was blocked. I let it go to voicemail. A minute later, my wife walked in and held the phone out to me with her hand over the microphone. "It's the man," she mouthed. "From the ceremony." I took the call outside because the kids were drawing on the floor with washable markers and I didn't want that voice sitting in the same room with them. The air was thin and cold. The man's voice had no accent I could place. "Thank you for your work," he said. We will require you again. I'm not sure. I started. It will be the same rate, he said. More if you agree to certain conditions. What conditions? You will not bring the chest camera. I swallowed. I wear it at every job, I said, as if that would matter to a person whose suit fit like a second skin and whose cufflinks were the shape of an idea. It's part of my package. You will be compensated for what you do not capture, he said. We are grateful for your discretion, but we prefer to decide what exists. What about the footage I have? What footage is that? It doesn't matter, I said quickly. It's nothing you'd want. Silence sat on the line for half a breath. When he spoke again, he sounded almost amused. We look forward to working together, he said, and ended the call. I stood on the porch for a long time, watching my breath. It rose and disappeared. I thought about the woman on the slab. I thought about the way she sat up and walked away and how I wished that made the whole thing less frightening. I thought about the man's careful smile, and the triangle at his wrist, and the way people who move around money also move around fear. That night it snowed again. Not a lot. Enough to make the streetlights glow like they were caught in webs. My son fell asleep with a book open on his stomach. My daughter slept with both hands next to her face like she was still a baby. My wife turned off the TV and leaned her head on my shoulder. I should have told her everything. I should have made a plan with someone I trust. Instead I said, "We need milk." And we wrote a grocery list. The next morning I packed our son's lunch and watched him zip his backpack and put his boots on the wrong feet. I corrected them and kissed the top of his head. When I turned back to the counter, the GoPro sat there, little red light off, black strap coiled. For a second it looked like a snake. That afternoon I opened our cloud storage and downloaded the file from Halloween. I put it on an external drive. I labeled the folder Taxes 2017, which was stupid and obvious, and exactly what my worried brain could come up with. I slid the drive under a stack of old camera manuals in a bin in the hall closet. It felt like hiding a question inside a question. Days passed. The man didn't call. The email didn't arrive. Thanksgiving slid into view. We bought a small turkey and invited a neighbor who didn't have anyone else in town. I made mashed potatoes badly enough that my wife laughed and took the spoon from me. Every time the phone rang, I thought it would be the voice that didn't have an accent. Every time it was not, I let my shoulders drop a little and then wondered whether I was relieved or disappointed. On a Saturday, our neighbor stopped by with a pie and a story about his dog. He mentioned offhand that Denver International sometimes hosts events. Nothing official, he said, and cut the pie with a plastic knife. You hear things. My cousin works security. Says there are doors in that place that go to hallways that go to rooms that aren't on the map. Airports are full of rooms, my wife said. That's their thing. Storage. Offices. Staff only. Hidden Christmas parties, probably. Probably, our neighbor said. He says sometimes on holidays there are gatherings. Fancy people. Black cars. He thinks it's donors. Or some kind of club nobody admits they're in. I thought airports were for planes, I said, and it came out lighter than it felt. That night, I dreamed about a hall that got longer the more I walked. The door at the end never got closer. Every time I looked down, my shoes weren't moving. I woke up with my hands clenched and my mouth dry. The next time the block number called, my wife answered without asking me. She handed me the phone. He says he'll try again, she whispered. If you're busy. I took it. We have a date, the voice said. New Year's Eve. Same location. Will you accept? In the time it took me to open my mouth, I wrote a whole argument in my head. Say no, because nothing about this is normal and money doesn't make things safe. Say yes, because money keeps the heat on and because a part of you wants to see if the blade ever comes down. Ask questions. Ask none. Tell him you lost your camera. Tell him you lost your nerve. Ask for more money. Ask for a ticket so you don't have to follow a stranger with a clicking walk through an elevator you never noticed before. Ask whether this time there will be vows or a kiss or anything else that would let you use the word wedding without lying. Same rate, I said, and hated the way the words fit in my mouth like they belonged there. Of course, he said. We appreciate professionalism. When I hung up, my wife stood in the doorway and looked at me for a long time. Is this the same people? Yes, I said. Are you going? Yes, I said, and then, because I needed at least one true thing between us that didn't feel like a lie, I added, I'm scared. She stepped forward and put her palm on the center of my chest, right where the GoPro usually sits. Then don't go. We need the money, I said, the way poor decisions have been explained since the beginning of time. It's one night. You wore a camera last time, she said. Wear it again. They asked me not to. Then don't go. I didn't answer. Later, while she folded tiny shirts that seemed multiplied by a spell, I went to the hall closet and reached under the manuals and touched the cold metal edge of the drive like it was a charm. I told myself I would watch the clip one more time and then delete it. I told myself that erasing a thing sometimes gives you power over it. I told myself a lot of stories that night, because stories are what you have when you can't change the ending. The snow outside softened the street. The blue horse with the red eyes stood out there by the airport, 20 miles away, waiting under the gray sky like a joke only the city understood. In the morning we would eat pancakes again and drink coffee that tasted a little like the roast and a little like the filter, and help our kids build a tower of blocks that would fall and make them howl with laughter. The phone would ring. The email would arrive. The calendar would get closer to the last day of the year. I would drive out to the airport again and look up at the gargoyle and press record. Or I would not. One way or another, the door would open, and the room would be there, lit by candles that dripped wax like small white tears, and people in masks would stand close enough to touch, and someone would raise a blade and say, "On this day, let us celebrate," and I would decide whether to keep looking. When my wife called out from the kitchen that someone was on the line for me, someone who had been at the ceremony and wanted to ask about future work, I stared at the wall and watched the light move across it in a thin rectangle. I told her to tell him I would call back. It sounded reasonable. It sounded like the way you buy time. It sounded like I still had a choice. Sorry to interrupt. If you're enjoying the story, let me know in the comments and tell me where you're watching from. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more. I always liked the quiet before sunrise, even when the cold pushed through the seams of Dad's old pickup and bit the skin under my sleeves. The radio gave the same kind of warning it always gave when clouds showed up in the fall, only this time the voice said it might turn into the storm of the century. Dad snorted and clicked the radio off with a dull little smack that matched his mood. He said those guys called every storm the storm of the century. His wedding ring tapped the steering wheel while he said it, the light in the cabin catching on the scratched gold. I looked away from that ring before my head got stuck on Mom again. Most days I could keep the thoughts small. In Dad's truck, with just us and the road, it felt easier to do. He had an early shift at the factory like he always did, so he was dropping me at school hours before anyone else would think to show. That had become our routine since I was little. He worked, I waited. And it stuck even after Mom got sick and then wasn't there anymore. The house felt wide and hollow and loud with the wrong kind of quiet now, but early drives were still calm. He'd sit a little hunched, jaw working, hands sure on the wheel. I'd sit next to him and watch the sky soften from black to the kind of blue that feels like it could crack if you touch it. We didn't say much. We didn't need to. It was a way to start the day that didn't hurt. The parking lot at school was empty when we pulled in. The building looked bigger without cars around it, like a ship tied to a dock that no one remembered to board. I reached for the door handle and a wave of cold slammed up my sleeves so hard I swore out loud. Dad swore back, but it was the soft kind, and pulled off his scarf. He didn't wrap it around my neck like he used to. He just tossed it over so I could do it myself. Somewhere between the grief and the growth spurts, He'd stopped fussing over me and started treating me like I already had a beard and a mortgage. Clouds were rolling in thick and low. The first flakes came as little sideways dashes. I looked up and then, for no good reason, felt like I should look down, too, like the snow might sneak up from below. Dad told me to try to stay warm. I told him I would. The truck rattled as he drove away, and I stood there with my breath blooming white in front of me and the scarf itching a little at the back of my neck. Early is good for me. Nobody's talking. Nobody's asking. I can do my homework, or read or burn through the 3 free levels of some game without grinding up all my data. Teachers know me well enough by now that they just nod when they see me and leave me alone. Sometimes the janitor will joke that I ought to be on the payroll. I usually smile and make a face and tuck my hands back into my sleeves because the heat doesn't hit the hallways that early. The building smells like dust and floor polish and paper. It always reminds me of the first day of school, even when it's February or April or some other month that has nothing to do with fresh starts. By the time the first bell rang, the flakes had turned into a steady, white tilt outside the windows. By the time we hit 6th period English, the snow didn't look like separate flakes anymore. It looked like a curtain being tugged down the sky. Our teacher, Ms. Melas, was halfway through a speech about symbols and fire in Lord of the Flies when the speakers crackled. She paused and looked up without looking annoyed, which is how she was about most things. The principal's voice said we'd be staying on campus until the plows could get to our part of town. He said parents had been informed and that teachers would explain how pickup would work later. He droned like someone reading a grocery list. The word storm sounded like a word he liked to say. Brian, who sat behind me and never knew how to keep his voice in his own head, yelled, "Yes!" close enough to my ear that I jumped. He'd been doomed to a chemistry test after school. I guess he saw the hand of God and fresh powder and last-minute reprieves. "Settle down, Mr. Donovan," said Melas, but she smiled at him, and it was the kind of smile that made it hard to feel like you were actually in trouble. Then she looked at me by accident, or maybe on purpose, and a heat that wasn't from the radiator went up the sides of my face. She'd been my brother's teacher once, and used to call me cute when I was little and came to open house in a shirt with a crooked tie. I know it's dumb, but some part of me kept that in a shoebox in my head and took it out whenever she wore her hair up or said something sharp. She turned off the projector with a click. "I don't think we're going to solve the mysteries of civilization with that news hanging over your heads," she said. "You can put your books away for now. If you're going to sneak your phones, you might as well stop pretending. Just keep the volume down." There were the usual cheers, the empty rustle of paper going into bags, the soft ping of a dozen phones being woken up. Some people started talking right away, weekend plans, who texted who, whether this counted as a snow day yet, or just a snow delay. I didn't open anything. Sometimes I like to hold off. Let the quiet be quiet. I looked around the room at the usual cast. Arlette, cheer captain, nice to everyone without the sugar being fake, smarter than people let her be, sharp when she wanted to be. Delilah in the back corner, thin in a way that made me worry even though she never looked at me. Her hair had that greasy shine that never went away even on days when you could see she tried. She doodled as if the pencil and the paper were the only real things in the room, big eyes, spiky hair, a star here, a wing there. Little black stars smudged on the backs of her hands and under her cuticles from the pen she must have carried everywhere. Herman and Nick, both band, both pretending they were different people because one of them liked band and the other liked pretending he didn't. Chuck, red hair all static from the dry air, book wedged under her elbow like it was part of her arm. Brian, my friend since 5th grade, knock-kneed and fast and too loud in a way that got us both into trouble and somehow got us both out. He ran track and liked girls who ran fast and wore ribbons. I watched from the bleachers and said I liked girls who laughed at my jokes and let me have the last sip of their Slurpees, which is a dumb way to pick somebody but not the worst. He reached over and smacked the back of my head when he caught me watching people instead of listening to him brag about being saved from the chemistry gods. I told him no, and he told me yes, and a group of girls at the next cluster of desks laughed at both of us for being the same as we always were. Sometime later in that last hour, the room changed in a way that wasn't anybody's fault. The lights hummed, flickered, and then hummed again. It wasn't dramatic, but it took all the rest of the talking and put it in a jar so we could look at it. Outside, the snow was thicker, no separate flakes anymore, just gray-white sky pressed against glass. Delilah looked up for a second and then dropped her head again over the page. I had a thought that maybe she could draw the actual sound of snow if she wanted to. "Spooky," said Mayla's in the flat voice she used when something should have been scary but wasn't. Some people laughed and breathed out. She said, "What? Are you all afraid of a few flickering lights?" She wasn't mocking us. It was more like she was reminding us we were still in a room with warm air and tile floors. "We're not supposed to be here this late," said Chuck, who always sounded like she was telling a story even when she wasn't. Everyone turned to her because she wanted them to and because we sort of wanted to, too. "Nobody's supposed to be here after hours." "Why not?" said Brian, already winding up for a dumb joke. "Because of the witch, dumbass." "Language," said Mayla softly, but there was a smile tugging at her mouth. Arlette told Chuck she was being insane. Chuck shook her head like she'd been waiting for someone to say exactly that. "No, it's true. I read it in a library book about the land before the school. It was on a back shelf like someone hid it there." She looked at our teacher to see if she'd get shut down. Mayla's glanced at her watch and then at the door. "You can tell your story while I see what's going on with everyone else," she said, and the room shifted again. The phone on her desk looked dead. She left the door propped open and her perfume stayed behind for a second like she was still there. We dragged our chairs into a loose circle without talking about it, and without the drama you see in movies. Brian leaned his chair on two legs and then slammed it down just to make the circle jump. Delilah didn't move. She stayed in her corner and scratched at her drawing like we were static. Chuck liked to set a scene. She cleared her throat like the floor was a stage. "It was the oldest book I've ever seen in there," she said. "It looked like it was going to turn into dust if I breathed wrong. It was about this land and what it was before anything was built on it. There was a little colony here in the 1700s. You know, church first, dirt roads, a handful of houses, a lot of rules. They prayed for easy winters and the snow kept coming anyway, tearing up their crops, killing animals, and sometimes killing them. After a while they started thinking there had to be a reason. They decided there was a witch." Brian mumbled something gross. Arlette gave him a look that could have peeled glue off the underside of a desk, and he shut up. Chuck kept her eyes down on her hands while she talked. "She looked like a young woman," she said. "Always looked like that, even as people got old around her, and their kids grew up and moved away. Maybe she did a spell so they wouldn't notice she never changed, but when they did notice, they decided all the snow deaths were because of her. They went to her cottage when the first big flakes started. She was standing in the corner with her face tilted up like she was listening to the ceiling, screaming and chanting with her eyes rolled back. The town chief told them to light a fire to burn her, but the wood was too wet and nothing would catch. He tried to tie her hands but his fingers were so cold he couldn't make the knots. So he took a hammer and nailed her hands right into the hanging post. There wasn't any blood, no matter what he did. Witches don't bleed, that's what the book said. He ripped out her tongue so she'd stop the storm, but she had enough breath left in her to finish whatever she was saying and the snow buried the town. No one from there made it to spring, but her body was gone when people came through later. The nails were there. She wasn't." This is the part where I should say I rolled my eyes, but I didn't. I had my fingernails pressed into my palm and I didn't know it until my hand started to sting. Out in the hall, something knocked once, like a locker door bumped by a shoulder. The heater coughed and blew warm air that smelled like it had just been burned. "So the people who found the old town later built Arlena Falls here," Chuck said. "And our school sits right on top of the place where those people tried to get rid of that witch. Every year when it snows, she looks for another sacrifice. That's why we're not supposed to stay past dark. Kids went missing for years. No one could say why without saying this out loud." "Nah," said Herman from band. We have late practice all the time. That building is new, Chuck said. It's not sitting on the same ground. It doesn't count. She sounded tired when she said it, like she wanted it to be less true than she thought it was. I could have cut in and said it was just a story to make being stuck feel less like being stuck, but the hair on my arms had lifted like it does when you walk into a freezer. I checked the clock. Dad should have been getting off work soon. The schedule felt like a rope and I held on to it. He'd call or he'd show up, and I would get into the truck and he would tell me it was a rough day, and I would talk without saying much, and we'd get McDonald's fries because they were hot and salty and made your whole face feel awake. Instead, the day kept sliding. The snow outside got thicker and the light went flat early, like someone turned the sky off. The room felt smaller even though nothing had moved, and people started talking quicker and sharper. Jokes got mean in that way they get mean when you've run out of better ones. It must have been almost 7 when Arlette, who had been brave and steady all afternoon, put her hand up like we were still in class and asked if she could go get something from the cafeteria. It was a polite way of saying she was hungry and wanted to know if any adults were going to take care of that. She paused with her hand up and frowned. "Wait," she said. "Where's Maylaws?" We all looked at the door that had been left a little open. I tried to rewind in my head to the moment she walked away. I could feel where she'd been standing. I couldn't make a picture of her pulling the door closed behind her. "Probably checking on other classes," I said, because that was the line that went with the problem. "She'll be back in a minute." Nick, who doesn't talk unless there's something worth saying, rubbed at the back of his neck. "It's been a lot of minutes," he said, voice small in a way that didn't match his height. "There's no way she forgot us." Right then the power went out for real. No warning flash this time. Just a slam into dark that made everyone gasp at the same time. A second later the generator in the belly of the building coughed to life, and the lights throbbed. The window glass shuddered like something big ran past outside and bumped it with a shoulder. People fell out of chairs and tripped over bags and grabbed each other like sudden swimmers. "We should go look," Brian said, and then said my name like it was a team he was calling. He was already up and moving. I didn't want to go. I went anyway. I grabbed the fire extinguisher from the wall because that's what we got told to do on drill days. The hallway was a tunnel with rows of soft lights and a carpet that made sound disappear. The snow pressed up to the windows at the ends like dirty glass. I could taste dust from the vent. We opened the door to the nearest classroom. Empty. The computer screens were dark. The teacher's scarf hung on the back of her chair like she'd stepped into the hall and forgot it. We checked 2 more classrooms. Nothing. The teacher's lounge had a hard candy dish with a wrapper stuck to the rim and a bulletin board with crooked flyers. No people. No sounds. "Maybe they released the other kids first," I said, my voice too quick and too thin. "We're in an old wing. Maybe it's last." He held out his hand for the fire extinguisher. I gave it to him and told him I'd head back so we didn't miss our turn. It sounded stupid as I said it, but I needed to leave that hallway. I needed to be where I could hear other people breathing, even if those people were loud and wrong. When Brian came back a few minutes later, he was pale in a way I'd never seen on his face. He set the fire extinguisher down with a thud that made all of us jump again. "They're all empty," he said. "Every room. The lounge. Everything." Someone swore. Someone started crying. Arlette put a hand up to her mouth like she could push the noise back in. "She didn't leave us," I said, and even I didn't believe me. He swung around on me like I'd poked him. He said something cruel about the crush I tried so hard not to have, and I said something about him not keeping his brain where his mouth was, and the room shook on its hinges. "Not willingly," I said then, quieter, and I watched the words land on Chuck like a weight. "It was just a story," she said, and then she said it again but louder, and then she started to cry. "It was just a story," Herman said. "The witch thing?" Chuck nodded hard, scrubbing her eyes with the heel of her hand, smearing black. "First the snow," she stammered. "Then the building empties out, then the witch comes as one of us." The lights groaned. The glass sang with a new gust. Someone knocked their knee on a desk and swore. Brian swallowed like he had gum stuck in his throat. "How do we tell who?" he asked, and he took a long step away from everyone and looked at us like we were suspects lined up along the wall. The side of my face hurt where my own hand had pressed into it. My nose had that weird open feeling you get right before you're about to cry or about to laugh. "It's a story," I tried again, weak and late. "We're freaking out." Chuck shook her head. "The book is there," she said. "I found it when we started Lord of the Flies and I wanted a break from reading about boys with spears. It's real." Brian got a look on his face that I'd seen on him during races when he decided to run too fast and blow past the rest of his team because he could. He turned on his heel and paced, and then stopped in front of Chuck and grabbed her arm. His voice was loud enough to bounce off the ceiling. "How do we know?" She squeaked and tried to pull back. "She's quiet," she said. "It's someone we wouldn't look at first." The room tilted a little, like the floor wanted us to slide in one direction, and we all turned together. Delilah had her arms wrapped around her middle, drawing pad pressed to her stomach like something to block punches. Her eyes were wide and shiny. "What?" she said. "What?" She held her hands up, palms out, the way you do when you want a cop to see your fingers aren't on a trigger. In the middle of each palm the skin was smudged dark, like ink, like old bruises, thick circles where you'd think a nail would go if you were the kind of person who did that to someone. The generator died and took the light with it in a rush. At the same time a window on the far wall gave up and shattered inward, pushing a palm of snow into the room and showering us with glittering bits that still managed to be sharp. The room was chaos and noise and cold. I heard myself yelp. Delilah yelled that it was ink, that it was just pen, her voice climbing and climbing like someone trying to grab a rung that kept getting moved. Brian didn't hesitate. He didn't think about whether he should be the one to act. He grabbed the fire extinguisher again, and he went for her. I dropped my shoulder and hit him from behind because my body moved before my brain did. He elbowed me without looking and my nose lit up with pain like a white flare. My eyes watered. Blood dripped hot down my lip and into the corner of my mouth. The taste of metal and pennies filled my throat. Arlette's fingers were on my arm saying my name over and over. The lights rolled on, with that slow build generators have, then rolled back off again. The sound of running feet across desks, and the thunk of the heavy extinguisher hitting something. The sound of a door banging open. The sound of everybody going the same direction because going the same direction feels safer than splitting up. I ran because everyone else ran. The hallway swallowed sound again, and then spit it back in echoes. Delilah's shoes squeaked as she sprinted. She cried for help like there was anyone besides us here to hear it. There wasn't. Down the stairs in a tangle, a dozen of us together, breath hot and fast in the cold, hands out for a banister that felt weirdly far from the stairs, as if the building had stretched. The front doors shoved open hard and wind and white and needles of broken glass swirled in. She stumbled and fell to her knees in a drift, and pushed up and ran again. That moment is stuck to my brain. Her hands on the snow, her head down, hair stringing across her cheek, everyone behind her in a pack with shoulders hunched and arms out, some holding rulers or pens like that would matter, some holding nothing but a kind of fear that made their faces look like someone else. I wish I could tell you I stopped it. I wish I could make my hand do something different in the memory. I wish I could say we all came to our senses at the edge of the white. The truth is it happened fast and slow at the same time. The snow and the dark and the noise made it all messy. People slipped and fell and got up and then, all at once, we were not a class anymore. We were something with too many limbs and not enough eyes, and Delilah didn't have a chance. The sirens took forever and then showed up all at once. Lights strobed across the front of the school and made the churned snow into a churned strawberry slush color that shouldn't exist anywhere except in a gas station freezer. The wind cut through our coats like they weren't there. A woman with a paramedic patch took my chin and moved my face to the left and right, and asked me how many fingers she was holding up. I guessed right. She looked at the blood on my collar, and said I'd be fine with gauze. She said it in a voice that wanted to be kind but sounded tired. The police stood in a cluster the way adults do when they want to look busy without doing anything. Someone put a blanket around my shoulders and it turned heavy with snow right away. They led Brian to a car. He looked like he was someplace else, not in a checked-out way, but in a focused way that made my stomach twist. Chuck kept whispering that witches don't bleed. She said it like a prayer or like a question, and nobody answered. They drove us to the station and made calls and tried to get our parents all there at once. Dad showed up with his face tight. He saw my eye swelling and my nose bandaged and didn't ask about the rest, which is its own kind of question. He put his hand on the back of my neck in the lobby like he did when I was little and too tired to walk, and he wanted to steer me toward a couch. He didn't let go when we walked to the truck. I thought about Mom's laugh and the time she burned cookies and we ate them anyway and said they were the best because they were ours. I thought about the way there are holes that nothing fills, and I thought maybe this was one of them. Sleep didn't come. Morning did anyway. The news site for our town ran a story with a headline that wanted to be gentle and couldn't figure out how. It called what happened an accident. It called Delilah well-liked and quiet and a good friend. It said our teacher was on leave while the district figured things out. It made a point of saying she'd been at our school for 37 years. I read that line 3 times. I did math I didn't want to do. I pictured the way she looked when she smiled at Brian and then at me. I pictured how, even with all that time behind her, she still looked like she could outrun us all. I kept coming back to small details, maybe because the big picture tilted if I looked at it square. The candy wrapper stuck to the dish in the teacher's lounge. The way the generator shutter felt under my feet through the floor. The heat of blood on my lip in the cold air. The shape the snow made when it piled against glass and then let go. People tried to help in the ways people do. The school set up a space for flowers by the front door, and the bouquets froze and went gray at the edges as soon as someone left them. They asked for donations for the family on the morning announcements, when school finally opened up again. Someone made a sign and spelled Delilah's last name wrong. People were mad about that for a day and then forgot about being mad. They forgot other things too. Dad didn't talk much that week. He picked me up without being asked and let me ride in silence. He drove past the turn to our street one night, and we ended up at the edge of the river where the snow piles go to die in spring. The plows had pushed white into mountains and the salt turned everything gritty, and the water ran where it could find a channel. He tapped his ring on the steering wheel without seeming to know he was doing it. It made a soft sound. He said he wished he could fix it, and I didn't know if he meant the truck or me or the world. The paper ran another piece 2 days later written by a reporter who had probably graduated from our school and come back because that's what people do. It talked about the storm and the delays and the way the emergency response got clogged up by a jackknifed plow 3 miles from us. It mentioned how parents should make sure their kids know to check their phones for official messages. It said the cafeteria had food we could have had if anyone had remembered to unlock the doors. It said counselors would be available in the library all week. It gave an address where people could send notes to Delilah's parents. It didn't say anything about witches. It didn't say anything about nails or hands or history. It didn't say anything about our teacher except that she was home and not taking calls. People told me a dozen versions of what they thought they knew. In some of them, I was a hero for trying to stop Brian with my shoulder. In others, I was an idiot for getting in the way. In most of them, nobody could agree on who pushed whom or who yelled first. The only thing we all knew was that there was snow, and then there was red, and then the ambulance came too late to matter. I asked myself over and over what I would have done if we'd all been sitting in a different classroom in a different wing, or if the plows had made it through on time. I asked myself what would have changed if we'd been given snacks. It's dumb, but hunger makes the edges of a person ragged. I could tell you that wasn't the reason, but I keep going back to the way Arlette's stomach growled and the way she looked down like she'd done something wrong. I didn't go back into English for a while. We had a sub, of course, and he had a sweet voice and a gold watch, and he didn't ask us to do anything hard. He played a movie the first day and then 2 more films with the captions left on so he wouldn't have to speak. People whispered, Someone wrote Delilah's name on the whiteboard and then someone else wiped at it and smeared it gray. The sub watched us all like we were glass. He probably had a script they gave him, how to be careful with kids who had seen something they shouldn't have. It didn't fit right. It hung on him like a borrowed coat. After the snow started to melt and the sidewalks turned into channels of slush that soaked your socks and made you swear under your breath, I went to the library. I didn't know what I expected to find. Maybe I wanted the book to be gone so I could tell myself none of it had ever been there. Maybe I wanted to see it and touch it and lift a little dust with my finger and prove that the story in my head had pages to match it. The back shelves were shadowed because half the ceiling lights were burned out, and no one had brought the tall ladder to fix them yet. The spines back there had that old library look, faded colors, gold lettering cracked with time, titles that tasted like chalk. I didn't find a book that said it had anything to do with witches or this town. I found an atlas with pencil lines tracing rivers that were renamed or gone, and a farmer's almanac from the 1950s with a note about frost dates and a cartoon moon. I stood there a long time anyway, reading the names of things and thinking about how, if you put your hand on a book and close your eyes, sometimes you can make yourself hear the people who read it before you. Maybe Chuck put the book back someplace else. Maybe someone took it home and didn't bring it back. Maybe my brain wanted to walk out with a simple answer and got mad when the only thing it could carry was dust. In homeroom, a girl I barely knew turned around in her seat and told me she'd had the same teacher as her mom in middle school and her mom said the teacher hadn't aged at all. She laughed when she said it and made it a joke, but I watched the way her mouth twisted at the corner like she didn't want to be saying that out loud. In the hallway, I heard somebody say Melas backwards under their breath, and somebody else shushed them fast. People like patterns. We like the kind of story that clicks when you fold it in the middle. I kept hearing the sound of nails in wood, even though I had never actually heard it. It's a sound my head made up because it needed a soundtrack for the way a story ends. I still see Delilah in the corner of the room when I close my eyes, even now. Head down. Hair in her face. Pencil moving like it knew where to go. Hands lifted. A circle on each palm. She might have drawn them there because she liked the way the dark ink looked against her skin. She might have wanted to see something holy on a regular day. She might have been trying to make her hands look different from how they were. There are 100 reasons a person draws a circle. Only one of them is a nail. When the last of the snow turned into dirty piles behind the dumpsters, they opened the windows to let the building breathe. The heaters finally clicked off. Dust motes spun in the light. The road salt left white lace on the blacktop like the ghost of snow that didn't want to leave. Dad stopped dropping me off so early for a while. He sat at the kitchen table and drank his coffee and watched me eat. He put the scarf on the back of my chair and left it there. The ring clicked on his mug and I didn't look away. You asked me now if I believe in a witch living under our school, wearing a body that doesn't line up with the years, and I don't know how to answer you in a way that will feel true. I can tell you what I saw and what I heard and what I felt. I can tell you about empty classrooms and a hallway that swallowed sound and a teacher who walked away and never came back to our room. I can tell you the paper said accident in the same paragraph it said fatality. I can tell you the snow came down hard and fast and made it easy for a story to slip in alongside it and tell us who to be. People always want to know the last thing. The last thing I said to Delilah before any of it. The last thing she drew. The last thing the teacher said to us before she left the room. Here is what I remember. I think I said, "Hey, you got a pen?" to Brian, and he threw me the wrong color, and I said, "Fine." I think Delilah was drawing a wing that looked too heavy for the body it was attached to. I think Mela said she'd be right back in a voice that made all of us believe her. I think the snow didn't care about any of that. It fell whether we looked at it or not. Later I read the paper again even though it made my stomach feel spoiled. It said, when the big storm hit our town, a bigger tragedy happened at the high school, where a student named Delilah died in the courtyard. It said her classmates considered her a good friend. It said we didn't check our phones to see we could go home. It said our teacher of many years was home on leave and that counselors were available and that people could send flowers to a neat little address. It didn't say our names. It didn't say mine. Sometimes that feels like a gift. Sometimes it feels like the wrong kind of mercy. If you drive past the school now on a warm day, you can still see where the glass was replaced in one window. It's clearer than the others, like a new tooth in a mouth full of old ones. I catch myself holding my breath at that corner, and I don't know why. Maybe it's to listen for what was there. Maybe it's to keep something from getting in. Maybe it's to remember how it felt to sit in a circle of chairs with a bunch of kids who will never be kids in exactly that way again, and to feel the room shift, and not know what to call it until it was too late. Dad keeps the scarf in the truck now that mornings are warm again. Sometimes he puts it over the back of the seat so it doesn't get dusty. Sometimes he drives with the radio on low and hums along to songs that live in that place where he doesn't have to say anything out loud. Sometimes he taps his ring without knowing it. Sometimes he catches himself and presses his hand flat on the wheel like he's making a promise. I sit there and look at the road and think about the ways we try to move forward. I think about the way a story can feel like a road, too. I think about the moment when you reach a bend you didn't expect, and you can't see what's around it, and you have to go anyway.